I stood in front of my old home, but a hateful middle-aged woman blocked the door. Her hand was on her hip, and her other hand pointed a finger directly at my forehead. "You ex-con, you want us to leave? Don't even dream about it." Lu Hong screamed, her voice shrill and piercing. "We've lived here for years. This house is ours now. Why didn't you just die in prison? How do you even have the nerve to show your face here? My name is Yi Feng. I used to own this house." Lu Hong was just an old neighbor, a woman famous in the area for being a bitter shrew. She felt bold enough to insult me like this for one reason. I had just been released from prison. I had walked back here hoping for a fresh start, but instead, I was met with this nightmare. A cold fire ignited in my chest. I looked at her, my expression darkening. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. Every word she spat felt like a jagged knife twisting in my heart. "Like mother, like son," she continued, her eyes full of venom. "Your mother was a fox who seduced men to get what she wanted. You're just a bastard she dragged into this world. You couldn't even get through the front door of your real family. No wonder you ended up in a cell." Lu Hong had always been jealous of my mother's beauty. For years, she had spread rumors behind her back. Now that my mother was gone and I was a fresh convict, she felt she could say whatever she wanted. She wasn't entirely wrong about one thing. I was an illegitimate son. But my mother, Chen Mei, hadn't seduced anyone. My father, Yi Xianxian, belonged to the Yi family of Nanling Province. They were a top-tier, powerful clan. When he was young, he came to Lianqing for business and fell in love with my mother. But the gap between their social statuses was a canyon they couldn't cross. Under pressure from his family, he abandoned a pregnant Chen Mei to marry into another wealthy dynasty. My mother raised me alone, enduring the judgmental stares of the town. She was gentle and elegant, never arguing with the jealous women like Lu Hong. I worked hard to make her proud. I had the highest entrance exam scores in the city and started my own company while still in college. By the time I was 23, my business was worth over $1 billion. A year before I went to prison, the Yi family finally came knocking. The old patriarch wanted me to return and become the heir. I wanted nothing to do with them, but my mother begged me to go. To honor her wishes, I agreed. That decision cost me everything. Members of the Yi family saw me as a threat to their inheritance. They framed me, sending me to prison for 5 years. While I was locked away, my mother was murdered. Every time I thought about it, my heart felt like it was being shredded. "Say that again," I said, my voice heavy and low. My veins bulged, and my gaze turned cold as ice. Lu Hong flinched. For a second, she saw the look of a predator in my eyes. She didn't realize who she was dealing with. To her, I was just a common criminal. She didn't know that the Yi family had piled dozens of fake charges on me, everything from robbery to stealing candy from children, just to make sure I never saw the light of day. They had sent me to the most terrifying death prison in the country, a place no one ever left alive. But I didn't die. Inside those walls, I met a heavily guarded old man. In 2 years, he turned me into a supreme master of martial arts. I became the king of that prison. Later, when foreign masters invaded our borders, the military begged for my help. I went to the Northwest alone and took the heads of 10 world-class generals. I founded the God State Guard, an elite force that terrified every enemy of our nation. I became a living myth, a legend hidden in the shadows. That was the only reason I was allowed to walk out of that prison. The people who framed me thought I was broken. They had no idea I was coming back with enough power to level their world. Lu Hong took a few steps back, trembling under my killing intent. But then she remembered her husband was inside. Her confidence returned. "I'll say it as much as I want," she barked. "You're a bastard born from a slap." The sound echoed through the street. Her words cut off instantly as she was sent flying through the air. I had tried to hold back, but my strength was far beyond any normal human. She hit the ground hard, her face swelling instantly. Blood leaked from her mouth along with a few broken teeth. "Murder! The ex-con is a murderer!" she shrieked like a dying pig. The neighbors began to pour out of their houses. They whispered and pointed as they saw me standing there. "Is that Yi Feng? I thought he was in for life. Maybe he escaped? Everyone stay back. What a waste. He was so smart back then. Now he's just a common thug with a record. He's finished." Suddenly, a gruff voice boomed from inside the house. "Wife? Who's messing with you? A burly, muscular man stormed out. He saw me, and his face turned red with rage. You little brat. You're looking for death, aren't you? How dare you come to my house and act tough? I recognized the man stepping out of the house immediately. It was Zhou Hai, Lu Hong's husband. He was a well-known local thug, the kind of coward who bullied the weak but crawled before the strong. He spent his nights at the Liancheng bars and various underground clubs, dragging a few lackeys behind him and calling himself a big boss. In reality, he was the bottom of the food chain. Lu Hong burst into tears the second she saw him. She pointed at me, her voice trembling with fake agony. Husband, it's this bastard. He's trying to kick us out, and he hit me. Zhou Hai's face darkened. He couldn't believe a kid like me had the nerve to act tough at his front door. Apparently, he had started working for a wealthy boss recently and made some good money, giving him the ego of a real kingpin. To a man like him, my past crimes were just a scary story. He saw me as nothing more than a common ex-con. He didn't hesitate. He lunged forward, swinging a heavy fist toward my face with a sneer. In his eyes, I was thin and frail. He probably thought I wouldn't last a single punch. He had built his reputation on being ruthless and a decent fighter, which was exactly why a local underworld boss had recruited him as a small-time leader. The neighbors shook their heads, pitying me. They expected me to end up in the hospital. Lu Hong looked triumphant. She knew her husband's temper. He didn't just fight. He left people crippled. I felt a cold smile touch my lips. A piece of trash like this dared to challenge me? Not long ago, I had been invited by the military to the Northwest Plateau. There, I had slain a God of War level expert with a single blade. Compared to that, Zhou Hai was nothing. I shifted my weight slightly, letting his fist whistle past my ear. Before he could recover, I swung my hand. Slap. The force of the blow sent him staggering back several steps. A bright red handprint bloomed on his cheek. Zhou Hai stabilized himself, his eyes burning with murderous rage. He reached into his waistband and pulled out a jagged dagger. You're dead, kid, he roared, rushing me again. I waited until he was inches away. I reached out, grabbed his wrist with a grip like iron, and twisted. Crack. The sound of snapping bone was sickening. Zhou Hai's scream ripped through the air, his face contorting in agony. Beads of sweat poured down his forehead as he realized the sheer, overwhelming power in my hand. Trash, I spat. I planted a kick in his chest, sending him flying. He hit the wall with a heavy thud and slumped to the ground, groaning and rolling in the dirt. The crowd went silent. Even Lu Hong was speechless, her hand clamped over her mouth. I started walking toward him, one slow step at a time. Zhou Hai began to shake, scrambling backward in terror. What are you going to do? He stammered. Before I could answer, Lu Hong's inner shrew took over. She started screaming to the heavens. Murder! The ex-con is committing murder. The neighbors began to gossip again, their voices filled with judgment. I never knew he was this violent. Well, he went to prison for killing someone, didn't he? I can't believe they let him out so soon. I didn't care what they thought. They were just fence-sitters, blowing whichever way the wind took them. I looked down at Zhou Hai. Get your things out of my house. Now. This house was in the suburbs, but the land value had skyrocketed. It was worth millions now. A thug like Zhou Hai and a parasite like Lu Hong weren't going to give up that kind of prize easily. Zhou Hai glared at me with pure venom. He knew the law well enough to be dangerous. He couldn't understand how I was free. In his mind, someone with my record should have been locked away forever. Then, a thought struck him. Wife. He must have escaped. Zhou Hai shouted, clutching his broken arm. He's a runaway. Call the police. Lu Hong's eyes lit up. She fumbled for her phone. Of course. That explains it. There's no way he served his full sentence. The crowd buzzed with excitement, convinced I was a fugitive. I didn't stop them. In fact, I wanted the police here. It was the fastest way to legally reclaim my property. A few minutes later, 3 officers arrived. The man in charge was a middle-aged veteran named Li Shi. I could tell by the way he looked at Zhou Hai that they were old friends. They probably had plenty of dirty deals under the table. Officer Li, Zhou Hai yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. He's a fugitive. Catch him. He's an escaped murderer. Lu Hong added, playing the victim perfectly. Look what he did to us. Li Shi didn't even ask for my side of the story. He pulled out his handcuffs and grabbed my arm. You're coming with me to the station, he said coldly. If I was a fugitive, it was a huge promotion for him. If I wasn't, he was still doing a favor for his buddy Zhou Hai. Either way, he won. I'm not a fugitive, I said, pulling my arm back. My expression turned grim. Aren't you going to ask what happened here first? You got proof. Li Shi sneered. I reached into my bag and pulled out my official release papers. I served my time. I was legally released. You have no grounds to arrest me. Li Shi glanced at the papers, then looked at the bleeding Zhou Hai. He narrowed his eyes. So you're just a criminal who hasn't learned his lesson. You just got out and you're already beating people? Move. We're going to the station to sort this out. He reached for the cuffs again. Zhou Hai let out a breath of relief, a cruel smirk returning to his face. Zhou Hai was secretly gloating. I could see it in his eyes. He thought he'd won. He thought that once I was behind bars, he'd have plenty of ways to finish me off. Lu Hong stopped pretending to be hurt. She scrambled to her feet and pointed a finger at me, her voice shrill and venomous. You little bastard. Let's see how arrogant you are now. I looked at her, then back at Li Shi. It was clear as day. These two were in league with each other, snakes from the same hole. Two junior officers rushed forward, the silver handcuffs glinting in the light. They reached for my arms, ready to pin me down. Before I left prison, I made a vow to myself. I would never wear those things again. I had the will to resist, and more importantly, I had the strength. I shifted my weight, a simple feint that left them grabbing air. I moved like a shadow, slipping right between them. Li Shi's brow furrowed. His face darkened with rage. To him, this wasn't just resisting arrest. It was a slap in the face to his authority. You dare to resist? He growled. You haven't even tried to distinguish right from wrong. I replied, my voice cold. You just want to drag me to the station. Is this how you uphold the law? You're looking for death. Li Shi wasn't interested in reasoning with a pariah like me. He pulled out his baton and swung it toward my head with everything he had. In his eyes, I was just a scrawny kid who'd buckle under one hit. But my patience had reached its limit. I didn't dodge. I countered. I launched a kick with lightning speed. It connected squarely with his chest. Li Shi let out a strangled cry as he was sent flying backward. He hit the ground hard, his face turning deathly pale as he groaned in agony. My strength was far beyond what a normal human could imagine. That kick used less than 1,000th of my power. If I had used even a fraction more, he'd be a corpse. The other two officers charged in, but I took them out with 2 quick kicks. They tumbled away, landing in a heap. The crowd stood frozen, mouths agape. They couldn't believe their eyes. A thin, young man like me had just leveled 3 trained officers in seconds. He hasn't changed at all, someone whispered in the back. He just got back and he's already beating police. He's a monster. Maybe that release paper is a fake, another added. How could a murderer get out so early? Lu Hong is right. He must be an escapee. Not everyone was against me, though. I heard an old neighbor shake his head. Yi Feng was always a good kid. I never believed he killed anyone. Yeah, another agreed in a low voice. He's only hitting Zhou Hai because they stole his house. It's self-defense. That police chief is the one being unreasonable. Despite the support, no one stepped forward. They knew Zhou Hai was a thug and Li Shi was a powerful man. They preferred to watch the fire from a safe distance. Zhou Hai and his wife were stunned, but their shock quickly turned into a twisted kind of joy. By hitting a cop, I had declared war on the government. It didn't matter if I was legally free or an escapee anymore. I was going back to prison. And once I was gone, the house was theirs. They were thinking about the millions in compensation money they'd get when the area was demolished. To them, my life was just an obstacle to their payday. Li Shi crawled up, his face twisted with humiliation. He reached for his holster and pulled out his service pistol. He aimed it straight at my chest, his finger tightening on the trigger. My eyes narrowed. I lunged forward before he could fire. I brought my boot down hard on his hand, pinning the gun to the pavement. Crack. The sound of shattering bone echoed through the air, followed by a scream that sounded like a dying animal. I didn't move my foot. I ground my heel down, twisting it. The gun clattered away as Li Shi howled. Under the tutelage of the old man in prison, my skills had reached the pinnacle. Even a war god level fighter would fall before me. A small handgun was nothing. I was furious. This man hadn't asked a single question before trying to kill me. If it weren't for the fact that my old neighbors were watching and I didn't want to start a bloodbath, Li Shi would already be dead. The neighbors backed away, terrified. They saw me as a cold-blooded killer now. Zhou Hai saw his chance. He caught Lu Hong's eye and began crawling toward the house, trying to put distance between himself and the monster. You attacked a cop. Li Shi screamed at his subordinates. Call the station. Get back up. The two younger officers scrambled for their phones, their hands shaking as they dialed. I didn't stop them. Let them bring someone higher up. Maybe then I could finally settle this property dispute. And if the next person was as corrupt as Li Shi, I'd handle them too. I turned my gaze toward Zhou Hai. He froze, his entire body trembling. Don't come any closer, he shrieked. I walked toward him, looking down like a predator at its prey. I let a cold smirk play on my lips. So, I said quietly, are you moving out or not? Zhou Hai's face was a mask of terror, but greed is a powerful thing. He looked at the neighbors, then back at me, trying to find his courage. By what right, he shouted. Why should we move? I actually laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. I kicked him again, sending him rolling. By what right? You're asking me why you should leave my house. I stepped closer, ready to deliver another blow. Zhou Hai was a seasoned street thug. He knew the demolition was coming, and he wasn't going to let millions of yuan slip through his fingers. He hated me. He was cursing the heavens that I hadn't died in a cell. But as I took another step, his bravado finally broke. He scrambled backward, his mind racing for a lie. Your mother, he yelled, pointing at the house. Your mother sold the house to us years ago. You think you can just come back and steal it? I paused, my brow furrowed. That was impossible. If Chun Mei had sold the house, she would have told me. Seeing my hesitation, Zhou Hai grew desperate. I have the contract. I have a signed sales agreement. Go back and get it then. I sneered, my voice dripping with ice. I'd love to see exactly when my mother supposedly sold this house to you. Zhou Hai's eyes lit up with a flash of triumph. It worked. He had spent months preparing for this day. Ever since he heard about the upcoming demolition, he paid a professional to forge a sales contract. He knew the compensation money would be millions, and he wasn't about to let it go. Since my mother, Chun Mei, was dead, he figured her handwriting was impossible to verify. He scrambled to his feet and stumbled into the house to grab the fake document. Just then, a black sedan pulled up outside. A group of uniformed officers stepped out, led by a middle-aged man with a stern face. It's Director Zhao, Li Shi shouted, his face twisting into a predatory grin. He looked at me like I was already a dead man. You're finished, kid. Once they get you back to the station, I'll make sure you never see the sun again. I narrowed my eyes as the man, Zhao, approached. He walked with a heavy, purposeful stride. I didn't recognize him, but I could sense his strength. He was at the level of a soldier king. To an ordinary person, he would be terrifying. To me, he was an ant. Back in prison, the military had invited me to train the God State Guard. Even the weakest recruit I trained reached the soldier king level. The best ones were now war gods, commanding armies across the country. I wasn't worried about his strength, but I was curious about his character. If he was as corrupt as Li Shi, I'd break him too. Director Zhao, you're finally here. Li Shi hobbled over, bowing and scraping like a servant. The sight of the backup had restored his courage. Zhao looked at Li Shi with visible disgust. He glanced at the officer's limp, broken arm and knew immediately it was a clean fracture. He had been in the police force for years and knew exactly what kind of trash Li Shi was. Still, assaulting an officer was a serious crime. What happened here? Zhao asked, his voice deep and commanding. This kid just got out of prison, Li Shi barked, pointing a shaking finger at me. He tried to seize someone else's property. When I tried to stop him, he attacked me. Zhao didn't take the bait. He wasn't a fool. He walked up to me, his gaze calculating. You just got out? I stood my ground, my expression blank. I nodded once. Don't listen to him, officer. Lu Hong chimed in, her voice a shrill, piercing screech. He's a criminal. Take him away. He should be executed. She was desperate to see me gone so she could claim the money. I didn't argue. I simply reached into my pocket and handed Zhao my release papers from Shili prison. Yi Feng. Zhao muttered. He recognized the name. My case had caused quite a stir years ago. But when his eyes drifted to the bottom of the paper, to the words Shili Prison, his face turned pale. Most people had never heard of Shili. But Zhaoan knew. It was the most terrifying prison in the country, tucked away in a desolate no-man's land in the northwest. It housed the most vicious killers and martial arts masters in existence. It was a death trap. Zhaoan's own unit had been stationed there years ago. In 3 years, he had never seen a single person walk out alive. He stared at the release form, then at my calm face, and finally at Li Shi's shattered arm. It made sense now. No one who survived Shili was ordinary. Even a soldier king would struggle against the monsters in that place, let alone a piece of trash like Li Shi. He checked the official seal. It was real. Despite being retired from the military for a decade, he knew that stamp anywhere. I was a legal citizen. He had no reason to arrest me. Director Zhao, why are you just standing there? Li Shi hissed, getting impatient. He assaulted a cop. Handcuff him. Zhaoan snapped. He already hated being told what to do, especially by a subordinate he despised. He turned on Li Shi, his eyes cold. Are you trying to tell me how to do my job? Get lost. Li Shi flinched, his mouth hanging open. He didn't dare utter another word. I felt a slight respect for Zhaoan. At least he wasn't in their pocket. He handed the papers back to me. Your documents are in order. Now, tell me what's going on. Before I could speak, Lu Hong pushed forward. Director, you have to understand. He's trying to steal our house. He even beat us up. Zhaoan looked at me warily. Men from Shili were dangerous. To them, hurting someone was as natural as breathing. I let out a dark laugh. Lu Hong, we've been neighbors for years. Since when did my house become yours? We have the contract, she screamed. Your mother signed it herself? Zhou Hai, show him. Zhou Hai didn't dare act tough in front of a deputy director. He hurried over and handed a piece of paper to Zhaoan. The officer studied it carefully. It looked legitimate. It had my mother's name and a bright red thumbprint at the bottom. Zhaoan handed the contract to me. Is this your mother's signature? I took the paper. One look was all I needed. I had spent my entire childhood being tutored by my mother. I knew her handwriting better than my own. This was a clever imitation, about 80% accurate, but it wasn't hers. I flicked the paper contemptuously. You've got guts, Zhou Hai. You actually forged a contract to steal my home. Forge, Lu Hong shrieked, her face turning red. That's her signature. Everyone knows it. She thought she was safe. My mother was dead, so there was no one left to prove the handwriting was fake. As far as they were concerned, if I couldn't prove it was a forgery, the house was theirs. They both started to smirk, thinking they had won. I reached into my worn-out backpack and pulled out an old, yellowed letter. I handed it directly to Zhaoan. My mother wrote this to me. I said, my voice cold. Take a look. You'll know the truth soon enough. Lu Hong and Zhou Hai froze. I saw the color drain from their faces. They were getting nervous now. My mother, Chen Mei, had passed away shortly after I was sent to prison, but she had managed to write me a few letters before she died. I had kept them like treasures. They were the ultimate proof of her handwriting. Honestly, with my current resources, I didn't need to waste my breath on people like this. One phone call could have wiped them off the map, but I had just returned. I didn't want to draw any unwanted attention from the powerful enemies who had framed me. Not yet. I needed to investigate my mother's death and find the people who ruined my life, one by one. Director Zhao, verify it for yourself, I said, handing him the letter. Zhaoan didn't even bother reading the content. He skipped straight to the signature at the bottom. He held the letter next to the contract and compared them. It wasn't even close. The signature on the contract was a blatant fake. Humph. Zhaoan's face darkened. He glared at the couple. Do you realize that forging a legal contract is a criminal offense? Zhaoan was a former soldier. He was blunt, honest, and hated people who tried to steal from others. That personality was great for the military, but it had stalled his career in the world of politics. He had been stuck as a deputy director for 10 years, unmoving like a stubborn rock. The moment Zhaoan snapped, Lu Hong crumbled. She fell to her knees, trembling. Director Zhao, we didn't mean it. Please, have mercy on us. The crowd of neighbors erupted. The tide had turned instantly. Suddenly, everyone was pointing fingers. I knew it, one neighbor shouted. Lu Hong told us she bought the house because Chun Mei needed money for medical bills. It was all a lie. The whispers grew louder. Lu Hong didn't care about her dignity anymore. She just kept begging for mercy. Zhou Hai stood there, his face turning a sickly shade of green. He never expected me to have kept my mother's old letters. Zhaoan ignored their pleas. He looked at me instead, his eyes narrowing. He was a smart man. He had seen the way I crushed Li Shi's hand earlier. To him, my combat skills were at a professional level. He knew someone from Shili prison could have easily dealt with this couple permanently without leaving a trace. He started to look at the couple with pity. They had no idea who they were messing with. Yi Feng, we've been neighbors for years. Lu Hong wailed, crawling toward me and grabbing my pant leg. Be kind. We'll give the house back. We'll move out right now. Forging a contract for a property this size was major fraud. The prison sentence wouldn't be light. I looked down at her with pure disgust and kicked her hand away. Get out, I spat. As for how you're handled, that's Director Zhao's business. Not mine. The rest was simple. Zhou Hai didn't dare resist. He started hauling their junk out of my house and back into their own place next door. They were fast. In less than an hour, the house was empty. Li Shi, the officer I'd injured, didn't say a word the whole time. He was seething, blaming Zhou Hai for this mess. As Zhaoan prepared to take the couple away, Zhou Hai shot me one last look full of resentment. I barely noticed. To me, they were just ants. Li Shi wasn't ready to let it go, though. He was bruised and broken, yet I was walking free. Usually, even if I was right, I'd be taken to the station for assaulting an officer. He could see Zhao and was protecting me. Director Zhao, Li Shi grumbled. This isn't right. This kid attacked me. That's a crime. You're just letting him go. Zhao turned, his eyes sharp. Get lost. I don't need you telling me how to do my job. Li Shi grit his teeth, but he knew better than to argue. He clutched his broken arm and limped away with his subordinates. Zhao knew the truth about Shili prison. He had been stationed there once. He knew it was a place where only the strongest survived. To see someone walk out after 5 years, completely intact, was a first for him. He was curious about me. Mr. Yi, Zhao said, stepping forward as I headed for my door. He handed me a simple business card. If you ever need anything, give me a call. I paused, surprised. I took the card and slipped it into my pocket. Thanks for today, Director. I like the man. He was fair. When someone offers an olive branch, you don't break it. It was nothing, Zhao said. Just stay out of trouble. It was a piece of advice, but also a warning. He turned and got into his black sedan, driving away with the couple in the back. Finally, I stepped into the house. It had been so long. The layout was the same, but it was hollow. All the things my mother and I had owned were gone. This place held every memory of my life before the provincial university, before everything went wrong. I stood in the empty living room. I could almost see my mother's shadow in the kitchen. My eyes blurred, and a single tear hit the floor. She had raised me alone, suffered so much, and then died while I was behind bars. I clenched my fists until my knuckles turned white. A cold, burning rage filled my chest. Yi family, I will make you pay for everything. Vengeance was the only thing on my mind. It felt like a rising tide, ready to swallow the world. Xiao Feng, is that you? A frail, shaky voice came from the doorway. I quickly wiped my eyes and turned around. An elderly woman was standing there. Lupa, I gasped. She was our old neighbor. When my mother and father separated right after I was born, life was incredibly hard. Lupa was the only one who truly helped us back then. She was my mother's closest friend in the alley. It really is you. Her old face lit up with joy as she rushed forward and grabbed my arm. She studied my face, making sure it was really me. Lupa had watched me grow up since I was a boy. I could see the genuine joy in her eyes, and it warmed a small part of my frozen heart. Yes, it's me, I said softly. Come in and sit down, Lupa. I helped her inside and guided her to the sofa. After we exchanged some small talk, I couldn't wait any longer. I asked her about my mother. She told me that after I was sent to prison, my mother traveled to the provincial capital. No one knew what happened there, but when she returned, she was a shadow of her former self. She had lost so much weight she looked skeletal. Soon after, she fell gravely ill. She was gone within months. I didn't need to guess. She had gone to the Yi family to beg for my life. I knew those people. They were heartless. I could imagine the humiliation they heaped on her. My mother had always been healthy. A sudden, fatal illness right after visiting the Yi family? I didn't believe in coincidences. They were responsible for her death. The rage I had tried to suppress surged back like a tidal wave. I clenched my fists so hard my nails cut into my palms, drawing blood I didn't even feel. Tears escaped my eyes again. I had faced the most brutal inmates in Shili prison. I had stood my ground against foreign mercenaries on the northwest border. I had never flinched, never blinked, and never cried. But thinking of my mother's suffering broke me. Lupa sighed, her own face filled with pain. She was such a good woman. Elegant, kind, gentle. I still don't understand how she could just leave us like that. She patted my hand. Xiaofeng, it's all in the past now. It's almost the new year. You should find some time to go visit her grave. I had lost track of the days. It was already the 20th day of the 12th lunar month. New Year's Eve was only 10 days away. I will, I promised, wiping my eyes. Lupa gave me the location. She was buried in the cemetery in the western suburbs of Lianqing. Lupa, I asked, my voice serious. Did you handle her funeral? She shook her head. No. A beautiful young woman came and took care of everything. A beautiful woman? I frowned. Do you know her name? Lupa shook her head again. She hadn't thought to ask back then. I sighed, letting it go for now. I walked Lupa to the door and decided to head out immediately. I needed to buy offerings and see my mother. The cemetery wasn't far, just a few kilometers from my house. I made it there by noon. I stopped at a small shop by the gates to buy incense, candles, and a wreath. My mother's grave was halfway up the hill. The view was wide and open, overlooking the landscape below. In terms of feng shui, it was a perfect spot. But when I reached the headstone, I froze. Incense was already burning in the holder. There were fresh fruit offerings and a wreath. Someone had just been here. I was confused. We had no relatives in Lianqing. Who would come to visit her? I scanned the path leading down the hill, but it was crowded with people visiting their own lost loved ones for the holiday. I couldn't pick anyone out. Disappointed, I set down my own offerings and lit the candles. I wiped the dust from the headstone and knelt, staring at her black and white photo. The grief hit me all at once. I felt like a lost child again. I wanted to see her, to talk to her, to hear her nagging voice worrying about me one last time. But that chance was gone forever. At the bottom of the hill, a young woman carrying a little girl walked toward a black BMW. The woman was stunning, with fair skin and long hair draped over her shoulders. She wore a professional suit and dark sunglasses that hid her expression. The little girl was about 4 or 5, with big, clear eyes and chubby cheeks that made you want to pinch them. Mama, are we going home now? The girl asked in a tiny, sweet voice. Yes, the woman replied, her voice soft with affection. Now that Coco has said goodbye to Grandma, we can go. She placed the girl in the back seat and climbed into the driver's side. She took off her sunglasses and reached for the ignition. Mama, the little girl whispered, leaning forward. Other kids have a mama, a papa, and a grandma. Why don't I have a papa? The woman's hand froze on the steering wheel. Her heart twisted with a mix of sorrow, memory, and a deep, burning resentment. Even as a seasoned businesswoman, she couldn't stay calm when her daughter mentioned that man. Years ago, the Yi family had framed me for a dozen crimes, including rape. They even found a victim to testify against me in court. I had no way to prove my innocence. When the news broke, Lu Yingying, the woman who had loved me, believed the lies. She decided to cut me out of her life forever. But a month later, she found out she was pregnant. When she went to find my mother to ask about my prison location, she discovered my mother had already passed away. After handling the funeral, she couldn't find where I was being held. She chose to have the baby anyway, becoming the shame of her family and the laughingstock of Lianqing. Heartless bastard, she hissed under her breath, her teeth clenched. She forced a smile and stroked her daughter's hair. Your papa? He went to a place very far away. Mama, when will he come back? Coco's eyes were full of longing. At school, the other kids teased her for not having a father. She had no way to fight back. She just wanted a dad to pick her up, toss her in the air, and kiss her cheeks. Lu Yingying felt a sharp pain in her chest. She had been asked this question 1,000 times. She couldn't bring herself to crush the girl's hope. He'll come back someday, she lied, kissing the girl's forehead. And when he does, he'll bring Coco so many presents. Really, the girl's face lit up with hope. Lu Yingying gave a bitter, silent smile. She knew it was impossible. The man she knew had been sentenced to life for a heinous crime. He was never coming back. And even if he did, she would never forgive him. Lu Yingying promised her daughter she wasn't lying as they walked back to their car. I watched from the shadows of the mountain as the engine roared to life and the vehicle disappeared around a bend. When someone is gone, no amount of regret or love can reach them. I stayed on my knees before my mother's headstone, feeling like a helpless child lost in the wind. I was a man who had faced death without flinching, but in this moment, the dam finally broke. I wanted to scream to the heavens that I wasn't a murderer. I wanted her to know that her son hadn't rotted in a cell, but had become a legend on the battlefield, a man whose name made enemies tremble. I wanted her to be proud, but the silence of the graveyard was my only answer. I didn't know how long I stayed there. By the time I stood up, the sun was sinking into a bruised purple sky. The southern winter didn't bring snow, just a biting, freezing drizzle that soaked through my clothes. I pulled my thin trench coat tight against the wind and began the lonely trek down the mountain. My life ahead felt just as cold and solitary as the path beneath my feet. When I finally reached my house, the neighborhood was already dotted with the warm glow of kitchen lights. I hadn't even had a chance to sit down before a knock echoed through the empty hallway. I opened the door to find a young, graceful woman standing there. I recognized her immediately. It was Luo Yin, Lu Po's granddaughter. She had been a little girl when I left, but now she was a university student, attending the very same school where I had once been the star pupil. Before my downfall, I was my mother's greatest pride and Luo Yan's idol. To her, I was the big brother who could do anything. Now, looking at her, I saw a storm of conflicting emotions in her eyes. She wanted to believe in me, but the world had branded me a monster. I could see the hesitation and a flicker of fear in her posture. "Brother Foam," she said, breaking the silence. "My grandmother told me to bring you some dinner." She held out a tray of steaming food. It smelled like home. I didn't have the heart to refuse. I was starving, and I hadn't even thought about cooking. "Thank you, Luo Yan," I said, giving her a small, tired smile. "Do you want to come in for a bit?" She hesitated, then nodded and stepped inside. The house was a shell of what it used to be. She sat stiffly on the sofa, watching me as I sat across from her. I knew what she was thinking. In her world, I was a legend at Zhonghai University. I had started a business in my sophomore year and was worth nearly $1 billion by the time I graduated. My company was headed for an IPO before the handcuffs snapped shut. Now, I was just a man in a tattered coat with holes in his pants. I didn't care about my image. I shoveled the rice into my mouth, the heat of the food hitting my stomach like a blessing. Luo Yin watched me for a long time, her lips trembling as if she wanted to speak. Finally, she gathered her courage. "Brother Foam, did you really do those things?" I stopped chewing. I swallowed slowly and looked her straight in the eye. "Do you believe I did?" She looked down at her hands, thinking hard. When she looked back up, her eyes were clear. "No, I don't believe it. The man I knew wouldn't do something so horrible." A weight I didn't know I was carrying seemed to lift. I smiled, a genuine one this time. "I was framed," I said simply. The relief on her face was instantaneous. She beamed at me, her entire demeanor changing. "I knew it. I knew you weren't that kind of person." It felt strange to have someone offer me unconditional trust. I looked at her seriously. "No matter what people say I am, I would never hurt you." She grinned and reached for my empty bowl. "I'll go get you some more rice." "No, I'm full," I laughed. She stood up, clutching the tray. "It's almost New Year, Brother Foam. Why don't you come out with me tomorrow to buy some supplies? You need to fix this place up." I looked around the barren room. I didn't even have a blanket to sleep on. "All right," I agreed. "Let's go tomorrow." The night was brutally cold. The rain had turned the air into a damp shroud that seeped through the walls. I had no bedding, but before I could figure out a solution, Luo Yin returned with a thick quilt. It smelled faintly of her perfume and fresh laundry. That night, wrapped in that warmth, I slept more soundly than I ever had in prison. The next morning, Luo Yin arrived early. We spent hours scrubbing the floors and wiping away years of dust. As we worked, she chattered away about her life at the university and the stories people still told about my time there. It felt like we were back in the old days, before the world turned dark. By noon, The house actually felt like a home again. Finally done, Luo Yin cheered, wiping a bead of sweat from her forehead. Now let's go shopping. I looked down at my ragged clothes. I didn't have anything better to wear, but for the first time in 5 years, I didn't feel like a ghost. I followed her out into the cold, ready to face the world again. I didn't care about the judgmental looks from the neighbors. I hopped onto the back of the small electric scooter, and we headed toward the city center of Lianqing. My home was on the outskirts, only a few kilometers away, so it didn't take long. As we wove through the heavy traffic, I looked at the skyline. Lianqing was just a third-tier city in China, but the growth over the last few years was staggering. High-rises stood like a forest of steel and glass where empty lots used to be. Even compared to bigger cities, this place didn't look like it was falling behind. Before I was sent to prison, I had predicted this boom. I'd even had investment plans on my desk, ready to go. Then, it was all ripped away. Seeing it now proved my instincts were right. That business foresight was exactly why the old man of the Yi family had wanted to groom me as the heir. But that talent became my curse. It sparked the family struggle that cost me 5 years of my life. If it hadn't been for that old man in the deepest cell of Shili prison, the one who trained me until my strength surpassed even the greatest warriors, I would have never seen the sun again. As we reached the busy downtown area, Luo Yin spoke up from behind me. "Brother Feng, can you come to the school with me first?" I hesitated. "What for?" "I want to visit my old high school homeroom teacher," she said softly. "No problem," I replied. "Which school?" "Your alma mater. Lianqing Experimental High." Luo Yin had always worked hard. She used to see me as her benchmark, dreaming of attending the same school I did. She eventually made it in with top grades, but by then, I was already behind bars. I felt a pang of reluctance. I didn't want to go. How could I face my old teachers? I was a convict. Once, I was the student they bragged about. Now, I was a stain on their reputation. "Luo Yin, I'll drop you off," I said, looking at her hopeful eyes. "But don't tell any of the teachers I'm back." "Why?" she asked, confused. I gave her a bitter smile. What could I possibly say to them in my current state? She bit her lip, understanding my hesitation, and nodded. We pulled up to the gates of Lianqing Experimental High. I parked the scooter and told her to go in ahead of me. I intended to stay outside, but looking through the gate at the track and field, the memories hit me like a wave. I couldn't help myself. I started walking in. The security guard was a new face, a stout, middle-aged man, not the strict old guy from my day. He stepped out to block me. "Who are you? What's your business here?" "I'm with the girl who just walked in," I said with a polite smile. "I'm a former student. Just wanted to see the old place." He looked me over, noticing I had arrived with Luo Yin. His expression softened. It was almost New Year, and it wasn't unusual for alumni to visit. He stepped aside and let me through. As I walked away, I heard him mutter behind my back. Usually people wait until they've actually made something of themselves before coming back. Look at this guy, riding a scooter and dressed like a beggar. I heard the mockery, but I didn't care. I wasn't going to waste energy on a man like him. The school hadn't changed much. The red pavement, the massive classroom buildings to the left, the dorms to the right. Every corner held a piece of my youth. I could almost see my younger self running across that field. 10 years had vanished in a heartbeat. The only major change was a brand new classroom wing. I looked at it and felt a strange irony. I had personally donated 10 million yuan to build that wing right after I graduated college. Even though it was winter break, the campus was busy. Successful alumni were everywhere, their luxury cars lined up near the field. Groups of well-dressed people walked the halls, reminiscing. I wandered over to the culture corridor, where the school's Hall of Fame was located. My face used to be all over this wall. There was a whole section dedicated to my success and my donation of the building. Now, not a trace. My history had been scrubbed, replaced by photos of newer, cleaner success stories. Suddenly, I heard voices behind me. A group of men in sharp suits and women in trendy outfits approached. "Ching Ching, I heard you're doing great," one woman said, sounding envious. "You bought a house in the provincial capital and a new car." "It's nothing, really," the girl named Ching Ching replied. She tried to sound humble, but her face was glowing with pride. She was a famous live streamer now, a minor celebrity with millions of followers. "Don't be so modest," A man in the group chimed in. I heard the school is renovating again, and you donated 1,000,000 yuan. Is that true? You'll definitely be at the top of the donor list this year. Ching smiled, but then her expression shifted. Compared to the legendary student our school used to have, my million is just pocket change. The group went quiet for a second. They all knew who she meant. That guy had been a true genius, the pride of the city. He had started a massive company while still in college. By graduation, he was worth hundreds of millions. He had donated an entire building. Ching remembered the day he had visited years ago. The school had put up banners and rolled out a red carpet. There was a student guard of honor to welcome him. She had been part of that guard, watching him from a distance with a fluttering heart. He was the gold standard for every student here. She sighed deeply. I heard that by the time I got to university, he was already in prison. Some horrible crime. Would you like the summary of the next chapter? I stood there, listening to them tear my reputation apart. I heard he's in prison for a long time, one guy said with a sneer. He committed a massive crime. There's almost no chance he'll ever see the light of day again. Yeah, another chimed in. The school used to have his face all over the honor boards. Now, they've scrubbed every trace of him. He's not our pride anymore. He's our greatest shame. I felt a cold irony settle in my chest. I was standing right in front of them, the very shame they were gossiping about. I sharpened my ears, curious to hear just how far my name had fallen. Ching frowned, looking uncomfortable. Don't talk like that, she whispered. One of the men laughed. Ching, don't tell me you still don't believe it? It was all over the news back then. I knew she remembered me, but looking at her, I could tell she was struggling. In her mind, the confident, brilliant senior she once admired couldn't possibly be a cold-blooded killer. She probably thought her memory was just a trick of childhood infatuation. Anyway, let's stop talking about him, Ching said softly. Whatever he did, he still contributed a lot to this school. We know you used to worship him, the guy teased, but the facts are the facts. He's a monster. Ching pursed her lips and stayed silent. One of the other girls noticed the tension and quickly changed the subject. Forget him. Hey, Ching, I heard an alumna is donating 8,000,000 yuan today. Do you know who it is? I'm not sure, Ching replied. I just heard she runs a very successful cosmetics company. Apparently, she was in the same graduating class as him. I stopped walking. The name of the class stuck in my mind. The group behind me was so deep in conversation that they didn't see me halt. Ching crashed right into my back. I turned around. One of the men in the group immediately stepped forward, his face flushing with anger. He looked me up and down, taking in my faded, worn-out clothes. I was tall and fit, but to him, I just looked like a penniless loser. Are you blind? He barked. I raised an eyebrow. I think you're the one who wasn't looking where you were going, I said calmly. The man turned redder, ready to explode. He glanced at Ching, who was frowning at his behavior, and forced himself to swallow his rage. He settled for a cold sneer instead. Looking as pathetic as you do, I'm surprised you have the nerve to show your face back at this school, he spat. How I'm doing is none of your business, I shot back. And last I checked, this school isn't your private property. He choked on his words, looking humiliated. He wanted to swing at me, but Ching stepped in front of him. Senior, I'm so sorry, she said, bowing slightly. That was our fault. She shot the man a sharp, warning glare. He immediately shut his mouth, looking like a scolded dog. I liked this girl's attitude. At least when they were talking about me earlier, she hadn't joined in on the insults. I didn't want to cause a scene and have my old teachers come out to see me like this, so I just gave her a small smile. It's fine, I said. I turned and walked away. Ching stood there for a moment, staring at my back. He looks so familiar, she whispered. He's just some failed loser, the man muttered. He looks like Yi Feng, she said, her voice trembling slightly. The senior who built the science building. Then she shook her head, dismissing the thought. No, that's impossible. He's in prison. They said he'd never get out. I kept walking until I reached the far end of the sports field, near the faculty dorms. I was ready to leave this place behind when a tiny, high-pitched voice stopped me in my tracks. Daddy. I froze. I felt a small tug on my pant leg. I looked down and saw a little girl, maybe 4 or 5 years old. She was adorable, with big, round eyes and a face like a porcelain doll. She was staring up at me with pure joy. I knelt down, confused but amused. Why are you calling me daddy? I asked gently. She gripped my trousers tightly, her expression dead serious. I've seen daddy's pictures. You're my daddy. My heart skipped a beat. This was the little girl from the cemetery yesterday. I had no idea that when I was sent to prison 5 years ago, Lu Yingying was already pregnant. This tiny, precious girl was my own flesh and blood. I didn't know the truth yet. I just sighed, thinking how lucky I would be to have a daughter this cute. I'm not your daddy, I said, patting her head. Where are your parents? I looked around, but the area was empty. I figured she belonged to one of the teachers and had simply mistaken me for someone else. You are, she insisted. You look exactly like him. Just then, Luo Yin ran over from one of the dorm buildings. Brother Foam? I thought you weren't coming in. Oh, wow. Who is this? She's so cute. Luo Yin knelt down to pet her, but the little girl shrank back, hiding behind my leg. Whose kid is this? Luo Yin asked. I have no idea, I said, feeling completely lost. She just ran up and called me daddy. You are my daddy, the girl whispered, her lip trembling. I felt a pang of guilt. I knelt again and looked her in the eyes. Listen, little one, you need to go find your mom. I have to go now. I stood up to leave, but she wouldn't let go. Her eyes filled with tears, looking absolutely heartbroken. Daddy, please don't leave Coco. Please. My heart wrenched. I knelt back down, my voice softening. I'm really not your daddy. Go back inside, okay? I gently pried her tiny hands off my pants and turned away. I forced myself to walk toward the school gate. Behind me, I could feel her eyes following me, filled with longing. Inside the faculty building, 2 figures walked out. One was Lu Yingying, looking elegant in a sharp suit and a heavy coat. Beside her was an older woman with thick glasses, Chin, my old math teacher. Yingying, I want to thank you on behalf of the school, Chin said. Please, Teacher Chun, Lu Yingying replied with a smile. The school raised me. It's only right that I give something back. She was here to finalize the 8 million yuan donation for the new building. But as she stepped outside, her eyes scanned the yard for her daughter, unaware that the man she had been searching for 5 years had just walked out of her life again. The discussion inside the building was wrapping up as the little girl spotted Lu Yingying. She sprinted toward her, tears streaming down her face. Mommy, she sobbed. Daddy doesn't want me anymore. Lu Yingying felt a sharp pang in her chest. Lately, the girl had been crying for her father constantly, and it was becoming a real headache. She assumed the child was just having another episode of missing a man she'd never known. She knelt down, scooped the girl up, and wiped the tears from her red cheeks. Coco, don't cry, she said softly. You're so cute. How could Daddy not want you? The girl gasped for air between sobs. I just saw him. I saw Daddy. He didn't want me. She started wailing even harder. Lu Yingying's heart ached. Coco, don't talk nonsense. Your father went to a place very, very far away. How could you have seen him? Thinking of that man, the one she loved and hated in equal measure, made her blood boil. Seeing her daughter in such pain only made that resentment grow stronger. Standing nearby, Chin watched them with a heavy heart. She knew exactly who this child belonged to. This little girl was the daughter of her most brilliant former student. Because of this child, Lu Yingying had endured years of cold stares and nasty rumors. Chin sighed. Once, that student had been the pride of the school. Whenever she talked to teachers from other districts, his name was the first one she bragged about. He had been like a falling star, blindingly bright for one brief moment before crashing into total darkness. When I was sent to prison 5 years ago, many of the teachers believed I was framed. They had even shown up at the trial to support me. But with the evidence and witnesses stacked against me, they eventually had to accept that their star pupil had lost his way. Chin forced a small smile and turned to Lu Yingying. Yingying, we've settled everything. Go ahead and comfort the little one. I'll go speak with the principal. All right. Thank you, Teacher Chun, Lu Yingying replied. As Chin walked back toward the office, Lu Yingying held her daughter close. Stop crying, Coco. Mommy will take you to get something delicious. Mommy, I'm not lying, the girl insisted stubbornly. I really saw Daddy. Lu Yingying gave a bitter smile. She had spent 5 years searching for any scrap of news about me and found nothing. How could I suddenly appear here? She figured the girl was just so desperate for a father that she'd mistaken a stranger for me. To keep the peace, she played along. Mommy believes you, she lied. Daddy will be home soon. So don't cry, okay? The girl stopped sobbing and looked up with wide, innocent eyes. Really? When has Mommy ever lied to you? Lu Yingying smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind the girl's ear. But before he comes back, you need to grow up a little more. That way, Daddy will like you even more. Okay, I'll eat lots and lots of food, Coco promised. Then he'll definitely like me. Lu Yingying carried her to the BMW parked on the playground. The car did a quick U-turn and sped out of the school gates. A group of students nearby watched the car disappear. That woman is seriously impressive, one of them remarked. Who is she? Another asked. That's the eldest daughter of the Lu family. She's the chairperson of Mengxi Company. I think her name is Lu Yingying. Oh, her. We use their brand of cosmetics, a few girls chirped. I didn't realize she was an alum. We should have gone over to say hi. You'll get your chance, the first student added. The school is raising funds this year. A lot of successful former students are coming back to donate. Word is, Lu Yingying already pledged 8 million yuan. She's at the top of the list. There's going to be a massive ceremony after the new year to honor them. She'll be the biggest star in the school. While they gossiped, I had already left the campus far behind. I didn't care about any of that. I was with Luo Yin, heading to the largest mall in Lianxing to pick up some supplies for the new year. We pulled up to Lianxing Plaza. It was a massive 5-story complex in the heart of the city, packed with everything from supermarkets to luxury boutiques. Despite being a smaller city, this place felt as high-end as anything in a major metropolis. Since the holiday was approaching, the mall was absolutely crawling with people. After I parked the electric scooter, we headed inside. Things here weren't cheap. Luo Yin was just a college student and didn't have much money, so we headed straight for the supermarket section. The prices there were more reasonable, which explained why it was so crowded. After an hour of shopping, I was loaded down with heavy bags. Brother Foam, let's go buy you some new clothes for the new year, Luo Yin said, skipping ahead of me like a happy little deer. I looked down at my clothes. They were old and worn out. Back in high school, I wore the same outfit for years without a second thought. I never felt inferior because of it. To me, confidence didn't come from a label. It came from strength and knowledge. Still, we had the means now, so I didn't refuse. I followed her up the escalator to the 3rd floor. This was the fashion district. It was filled with designer shops and young couples, along with the occasional middle-aged boss walking arm in arm with a beautiful girl. Luo Yin led me to a quiet, high-end boutique. It was small, maybe 50 square meters, but the decor was elegant. Even for a space this size, the rent here had to be tens of thousands a month. This mall was a gold mine, likely valued at over 1 billion yuan. As we walked, my old business instincts kicked in. I studied the mall's layout and operation. It was identical to the business model I had planned for Lianxing years ago. I wondered what had happened to the company I started with my college roommates. I assumed my shares had been carved up the moment I was thrown into a cell. Thinking about my old partner made my blood simmer. One day, I would take back everything that belonged to me. We stepped into the shop. Unlike the crowded stores downstairs, this place was dead quiet. 2 salesgirls were slumped behind the counter, looking bored out of their minds as they filed their nails and scrolled through their phones. One of them looked up, her face lighting up with a professional smile. But the moment she saw my tattered clothes, her expression went cold. I saw the look on the salesgirl's face and understood immediately. If this was the kind of service they provided, it was no wonder the shop was empty. I didn't say anything, though. I was just here to buy clothes, not to fix someone else's failing business. The other salesgirl stood up lazily. She looked at us with zero interest. Just look around yourselves, she muttered, her voice dripping with boredom. Luo Yin and I walked over to the racks. We took our time, picking out a few styles and comparing sizes. Luo Yin held up a couple of shirts against me. These look great, she said, smiling. They'll make you look bright and sharp. She pushed me toward the fitting room with an armful of clothes. I tried them all on, eventually settling on 2 outfits that fit well. The rest were left scattered on the hangers. As Luo Yin started to reach for them to tidy up and hang them back properly, the salesgirl's eyes darted toward us. Her expression was twisted with disdain. If you aren't going to buy, don't bother trying them on, she snapped. Cleaning up after people like you is a nightmare. I frowned, but Luo Yin beat me to the punch. She was furious. What kind of attitude is that? How are we supposed to know if they fit without trying them? Besides, isn't cleaning up part of your job? The salesgirl's temper flared instantly. She pointed a finger at Luo Yin. I've seen plenty of people like you. No money in your pockets, so you come here to play dress up and then go buy the cheap versions online. You're just poor ghosts. You want a better attitude? Go to the luxury boutiques next door. Though looking at you, you probably couldn't even afford a single button in there. The two girls started mocking us openly, laughing as if we weren't even there. They had been in this industry long enough to judge a book by its cover. To them, I was just a guy in rags, and Luo Yin was just a college student with no spending power. Luo Yin was shaking with anger, ready to argue, but I grabbed her arm. Xiao Yin, don't bother with them. I wasn't about to waste my breath. In my old life, I wouldn't have even looked at people this insignificant, let alone argued with them. The salesgirl smirked, thinking they had won. See? I was right. They never planned on buying a thing. Just here to waste our time. What are you two talking about? A fashionable woman walked into the store. Her brow was furrowed, and her face was dark with annoyance. Sister Wei. The two girls instantly dropped their heads. Their arrogance vanished in a heartbeat. The woman was about to scold them when her eyes landed on me. She froze. Her jaw dropped in total disbelief. You Yi Feng? Su Weiwei. I was stunned. I never expected to run into an old acquaintance here. Su Weiwei was a high school classmate. We had sat near each other for 3 years. Back then, she was a beauty and used to slip me love notes all the time. I never accepted her feelings, but we had always been on good terms. The two salesgirls looked like they had seen a ghost. Their faces turned pale. They realized the poor ghost they had been insulting actually knew their boss. After the initial shock, Su Weiwei's eyes swept over my tattered clothes. She let out a soft sigh. She had heard about me going to prison. It clearly pained her to see the former star of our school looking so down and out. But then, a look of confusion crossed her face. People had said my sentence was long. How was I out in only 5 years? Aren't you supposed to be? She trailed off, unable to finish the question. I knew what she was thinking. It's a long story, I said, keeping it brief. That's all in the past now. She smiled gently, sensing I didn't want to talk about it. Well, I'm just glad you're out. Are you here for clothes? I nodded. Is this your shop? I've been running this place since I got married, she said with a bitter laugh. I felt a small pang of surprise. She was married. Then again, I was nearly 30 now. Time waited for no one. Pick whatever styles you like, she said warmly. Consider it a gift from an old classmate. I didn't refuse her kindness, but I had no intention of taking them for free. I placed the clothes I'd chosen on the counter and looked around the empty store. Weiwei, business doesn't look so good. Her face clouded over with worry. The truth was, her shop was on the verge of collapse. She owed several months of rent, and if she didn't pay soon, the mall would shut her down. Back in college, she had chased me relentlessly, but I was already with Lu Yingying. After graduation, she had given up on love and married the first man who came along. She thought it didn't matter who she married if it wasn't the one she loved, but she was wrong. Her husband was a gambling addict who didn't care about the family. Since their son was born, she had been the sole provider, struggling to keep this shop afloat. I won't lie to you, she whispered. I'm about to go bankrupt. If you need clothes, please, take a few more. I was about to say something when a group of men in suits marched into the store. They were mall management. Miss Su, the leader said coldly, you're months behind on rent. Today is the deadline. We're closing the shop. Su Weiwei's face went white. She practically threw herself at them, her voice trembling with desperation. Please, can you give me just a little more time? I'll find the money, I promise. No, we've given you enough time already. The manager was firm. If they closed the shop, she would have nothing. Her husband had already sold their house and gambled away every cent. They were living in a tiny rental, and without this income, she couldn't even pay for that. Just 1 month, she begged. 1 month and I'll pay everything. It was useless. The guards started ushering us out. Everyone out. We're locking up. Su Weiwei looked like her soul had left her body. The light in her eyes simply died. Just then, a man in a sharp suit walking down the hallway noticed the commotion. He stopped and stepped inside. Manager Zheng, what brings you here? The mall staff immediately straightened up and greeted him. This was Zheng Guozhong, the general manager of the entire plaza. He was the man who had planned and built this massive commercial empire. Su Weiwei didn't care about her dignity anymore. She rushed to him. Manager Zheng, please, don't let them close my shop. Not yet. Zheng Guozhong looked at her with a mix of pity and frustration. He knew about her deadbeat husband and the trouble he caused. But business was business. Miss Su, the rules are the rules, he said, preparing to turn away. We've been patient for months. There's nothing I can do. He started to walk out, but then his eyes landed on me. His footsteps faltered. His mouth fell open, and his eyes nearly bulged out of his head. Zheng Guozhong froze. He stared at me, his mouth hanging open as if he'd seen a ghost. His eyes were bulging, filled with a mix of shock and pure disbelief. Yi Dong. Chairman Yi, he stammered. The mall staff stood there, paralyzed. Even Su Weiwei looked stunned. She clearly didn't expect the general manager of this entire commercial empire to look at me with such intense reverence. I knew Zheng Guozhong. Years ago, he was just an employee at my old company. I was the one who promoted him to senior management and even gave him shares. I had been his mentor. I gave him a bitter smile. I'm not Chairman Yi anymore. No, Zheng Guozhong said, his voice trembling with emotion. In my eyes, you will always be Chairman Yi. He hadn't forgotten the chance I gave him. As an insider, he also knew the truth about my past. He knew my imprisonment was a total setup, a lethal blow dealt by the Yi family and the man who took over my chairman's seat. Back then, he was just a small employee. He had no power to stop them. He had to watch them drag me away. I nodded slowly, looking him in the eye. I have nothing now. I'm not the man I was. But if I still have any credit left with you, I'd like you to look into my old classmate's situation. Zheng Guozhong reacted instantly. Chairman Yi, I had no idea Miss Su was your classmate. If I had known, I would never have let them pressure her. He turned to the mall managers, his face hardening. Waive all of Miss Su's past due rent. Immediately. And from now on, nobody bothers her again. Is that clear? Su Weiwei looked like she was dreaming. A moment ago, she was hopeless. Now, with just one sentence from me, her crisis had vanished. She had wanted to help me, but here I was, saving her instead. She looked at me, her eyes red and shimmering with tears. Yifeng, thank you, she whispered. I smiled faintly. Don't thank me. Old Zheng is the one doing me a favor. Thank him. She hurriedly turned to him, but Zheng Guozhong just waved it off. It's nothing, Miss Su. Really. I watched him. He was still the same, capable, honest, and loyal. I realized then that Zheng Guozhong could be my breakthrough. If I wanted to take back my company, I needed a sharp nail on the inside to tear things open. But I wasn't a naive kid anymore. 5 years in the shadows of the business world, and the prison yard had taught me about betrayal. Just because he waived some rent didn't mean he was the same man I knew 5 years ago. I needed to test him further. Old Zheng, I said, cutting off his attempt to keep talking. This isn't the place for a long chat. I'm going to catch up with my classmate first. I'll stop by your office later. He nodded eagerly. Of course. I'll be waiting for you. As he led his staff away, I turned back to Su Weiwei. She was still staring at me. I decided to lighten the mood. What's with that look? Are you so moved you're going to marry me now? She snapped out of it, a trace of old sadness in her eyes. If I offered, would you even take me? I laughed awkwardly and changed the subject. Aren't you going to buy your old classmate dinner? My treat, she said, a genuine smile finally breaking through. She personally packed the clothes I had picked out and led me toward the dining area. Luo Yin followed us, her heart racing. She had heard the legends of Brother Feng back in school, but seeing his power even after years in prison was something else. To her, the legend was still alive. As we passed an electronics store, Luo Yin spoke up. Brother Feng, should we get you a phone? I paused. I hadn't used a normal cell phone in years. Right now, the only thing in my pocket was a small satellite device that looked like a cheap burner. But that burner was a high-level military line that could connect directly to the command centers of the Shenzhou Guard. The Shenzhou Guard was the most elite force in the country, and I had trained them myself. Many of them were war gods who had bled beside me. I wasn't ready to use that line yet. so I didn't need a regular phone for daily life. We walked into the shop, and I picked out a model for about 7,000 yuan. When it came time to pay, Su Weiwei reached for her wallet. Weiwei, your shop is struggling, I said, stopping her. Keep your money. I can handle this. I pulled out a thick stack of cash. The salesgirl gave me a strange look as I counted out 70 bills. She probably thought I was some broke guy pretending to be rich, but the truth was, I had plenty of cash. After the battles in the Northwest, the military realized I had been framed. They couldn't officially overturn the sentence yet, but they had enlisted me into the service while I was still serving time. That's how I ended up leading the guards. They had offered me a massive payout when I left, but I refused it. I only took a few thousand to get by. Su Weiwei didn't argue. She knew her own bank account was nearly empty. We took the new phone and headed for the restaurant. The weight of the past and the uncertainty of the future hanging in the air between us. All of Su Weiwei's money was tied up in the stock sitting in her shop. She had hoped to clear a profit during the New Year rush, but business was dead. She was standing on the edge of total ruin. After buying the phone, the three of us headed to a decent restaurant on the second floor. Once we sat down, I looked Su Weiwei in the eye. I didn't sugarcoat it. Weiwei, you can't keep managing the shop like this, I said. She stayed silent, so I kept going. Your sales staff are unprofessional. They have bad attitudes. If this continues, you'll never see a return on your investment. She bit her lip. She knew I was right, but she had her reasons. Those two girls weren't just random employees. One was her friend, and the other was her husband's cousin. If she fired them, her husband would make her life a living hell. Her marriage was a cage, and it was the source of her deepest pain. I'd seen enough of the world to read the fear on her face. If you want to succeed in business, you have to be ruthless, I told her firmly. You have to cut out anything that threatens the survival of the shop. If you don't, you're just waiting for the end. Su Weiwei nodded and gave me a bitter smile. I'll handle it this time. I'll make changes. She trusted my judgment. Back in college, I had started my own business and was worth nearly 1 billion yuan by the time we graduated. To her, my advice was gospel. She decided right then to fire those two and hire professionals. I'd said my piece. Whether she followed through was up to her. I wasn't going to overstep. I shifted the conversation to our high school days. We talked about the old times, when life was simple and we were just kids worried about exams. We laughed about the spring flowers and the autumn leaves, a time before the river of years swept us all away. 10 years changes everyone. Some people rise to the top, others struggle for every meal. Some end up in bad marriages, like Weiwei. Others end up in prison, like me. The mood lightened as we talked. Weiwei even teased me about how I'd rejected her back in the day. I practically surrendered on the spot, trying to dodge the topic, which made her burst out laughing. She was married now, and she kept a respectful distance. She knew where the line was. Suddenly, I remembered Zheng Guozhou. I needed to see the man currently running this mall. I told Weiwei and her daughter to wait at the table while I headed up to the 5th floor. The 5th floor was the nerve center of the mall. The executive offices were all tucked away back there. Inside his office, Zheng Guozhou was pacing. He was a nervous wreck. Years ago, Yunfeng Group had been a solid company with assets worth over 1 billion under my leadership. I had drafted a massive 5-year development plan back then, which included the construction of this very mall. Following my blueprint, the company had exploded to a valuation of over 10 billion. It was now a titan in Lianqing. But the truth was, its success had nothing to do with the current chairman. It was all based on my old vision. Now, the company was stagnant. It had no new ideas. Zheng Guozhou was facing a gamble. If he helped me take back Yunfeng, he'd reach new heights. If he failed, he'd be out on the street. Personally, he wanted me back. Selfishly, he was terrified of losing everything. He thought about the confidence I radiated. I looked calm on the surface, but he could feel a sharpness in me that was even more lethal than before. That was enough for him. He made his choice. He would back me all the way. I reached the 5th floor office area, but 2 security guards blocked my path. They looked me up and down with pure contempt. "You know where you are, kid?" One of them sneered. "I'm here to see Zheng Guozhou," I said plainly. The guards looked at my worn clothes and shared a look. They probably thought I was another beggar looking for a handout or a backdoor favor. "Who do you think you are?" the guard asked, crossing his arms. You think you can just walk in and see the manager? He told me that successful people in suits lined up every day to see Zheng Guozhong. A guy looking like me didn't stand a chance. Move it, the guard barked, stepping toward me. The manager is busy. Get lost. I stayed silent. I wondered if this was Zheng Guozhong's doing. Maybe the warm welcome earlier was just an act, and he didn't actually want to see me. It wouldn't be the first time I'd seen someone flip once they realized I didn't have my old power. If he was dodging me to avoid offending Xiao Jun, I needed to know. You deaf? I said moo. The guard's voice rose to a shout. Just then, the office door swung open. Zheng Guozhong stuck his head out to see what the noise was about. When he saw me being harassed, his face went pale, then turned a deep, angry red. He marched over to us. Zheng Guozhong, I said, my voice cold. I almost thought you didn't want to see me. His heart must have skipped a beat. He didn't say a word to me. He just turned and slapped both guards across the face. What the hell are you doing? He roared. I told you if anyone came looking for me, you let them in. The guards stood there in shock, clutching their faces. They never imagined a guy in rags could be his guest of honor. General, Zheng Guozhong started to say. Let's just go inside, I interrupted. I didn't want him using my old titles. Xiao Jun might have spies in the building. Xiao Jun was the roommate I'd gone into business with. The man who helped the Yi family frame me, and who was now the chairman of Yinfeng Group. Zheng Guozhong caught my drift immediately. Right. Inside. We walked into his office. I sat down on a plush, imported leather sofa and took a slow look around the room. It was a nice office. A very nice office. The office was massive, at least 80 square meters, and dripping with luxury. I scanned the room, taking it all in. A huge desk sat in the center, dominated by a widescreen computer and flanked by stacks of thick files. Behind it stood a floor-to-ceiling bookshelf filled with neatly organized folders and expensive-looking jade ornaments. On the walls, several pieces of traditional calligraphy hung in heavy frames. I recognized the brushwork immediately. They were originals from famous masters, worth a fortune. The whole place smelled of old paper and expensive ink. It was designed to make the owner look like a man of culture and status. You've really moved up in the world, old Zheng, I said, a small smirk playing on my lips. You're a big shot in this company now. Zheng Guozhong didn't sit. He stood off to the side, his body trembling slightly. He gave me a bitter, humble smile. Chairman Yi, if it wasn't for you promoting me back then, I wouldn't have any of this. It has more to do with your own hard work, I replied casually. I don't need flattery. I wasn't just being polite. Back then, I only promoted people based on raw talent. If Zheng hadn't been capable, I never would have noticed him, let alone put him in power. But seeing his reaction now told me something important. He was a man who remembered his debts. I only know that Chairman Yi helped me when I was nothing, he said firmly. That's enough for me. I nodded. I remembered why I chose him. There had been another candidate back then with even better skills, but Zheng had character. His mother had been terminally ill, and he was penniless. I didn't just give him a job. I paid for his mother's medical bills. That's why he had been so quick to waive Su Weiwei's rent earlier. He knew what it felt like to be desperate. Sit down, I said, waving a hand toward a chair. Tell me how the group has changed over the last few years. Zheng sat on the edge of the seat, watching me with a mix of awe and curiosity. Even though I was dressed in rags and had nothing to my name, I could tell he saw the same man he used to follow. Only now, I was colder, sharper, and more composed. He started to give me a detailed history of the company's growth. I cut him off. Skip the history lesson. I already know the company would succeed. My business plan was flawless. If it's only worth 10 billion now, that's actually a disappointment. Just tell me about the share structure. That was the only thing that mattered. That was how I would take back what was mine. Zheng cleared his throat and began to break it down. Before I went to prison, I owned 70% of the company. Xiao Jun owned 20%, and the remaining 10% belonged to the founding elders. Of my 70%, I held 15% in my own name, but the other 55% was registered under my mother, Chun Mei. It was a safety net I'd set up years ago. It turned out my instincts were right. After I was locked up, my personal 15% was confiscated and auctioned off. With the Yi family pulling strings in the background, Xiao Jun managed to buy those shares. But even with that, My mother's 55% remained the largest stake in the company. With me in prison and my mother gone, the seat of the majority shareholder had been empty for years. Xiao Jun had stepped into the vacuum, acting as the primary shareholder and chairman. He's been trying to dilute those shares for 2 years, Zheng whispered. He wants to issue new stock to wash out your mother's 55%, but the other shareholders keep blocking him. He needs 51% of the vote to pass it, and he's not there yet. A cold smile spread across my face. This was better than I expected. On paper, I, through my mother's estate, was still the king of Yinfeng Group. Chairman Yi, Zheng asked tentatively, his eyes searching mine. The 15% was auctioned, but that 55%, is it still in your hands? I looked him dead in the eye. It is. Zheng let out a long, shaky breath, looking like a man who had just won the lottery. Welcome back, Chairman. Please, lead us again. I had kept the original share agreements in a private underground bank vault. Xiao Jun had no idea they existed. I'm coming back, I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous low. And just so you know, Zheng, if you had hesitated for even a second today, you would have lost everything you own within a month. You passed the test. Cold sweat broke out on Zheng's forehead. He knew I wasn't joking. When is the next board meeting? I asked. I want to give Xiao Jun a surprise. It's the end of the year, Zheng said excitedly. The meeting is in a few days. I'll make sure everything is ready for your return. Good. Let's give them a show they'll never forget. I stood up to leave. I had what I needed. Chairman, let me take you to dinner, Zheng offered quickly. No need. My friend is waiting for me downstairs. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back. One more thing. Not a word to anyone that I'm back. And have a decent suit ready for me. I closed the door behind me, leaving Zheng standing there in a daze. I knew what he was thinking. For years, Xiao Jun had been suppressing him, keeping him as a lowly mall manager despite his seniority. If I came back, Zheng's position would be solidified forever. I walked out of the building and into the cold air. The pieces were finally on the board. Xiao Jun thought he had won, but he was just a squatter in my empire. In a few days, I was going to evict him. My presence in the Lianxing Plaza office area was becoming a variable no one could predict. I quietly slipped away from the management floor and headed back down to the second-floor dining area. Luo Yin and Su Weiwei were still there, waiting. Brother Feng, where did you go? Luo Yin pouted, her voice full of feigned annoyance. You were gone for so long. Nowhere special, I said, keeping my voice casual. I was just catching up with Manager Zheng. We're old friends, and since he helped us out so much today, I had to show some appreciation. I couldn't just walk away. Before she could grill me further, I changed the subject. All right, we still have things to buy? We should get moving. I turned to Su Weiwei. Weiwei, you should get back to your shop. If you leave it to your staff much longer, you might go out of business. Su Weiwei paused, then flashed a charming smile. Fine, let's stay in touch. She waved her phone at me, signaling for a call later. I nodded, and we parted ways in the corridor. For the next hour, I played the role of the hard-working laborer, carrying armfuls of bags behind Luo Yin as we finished shopping. Finally, I dropped her off and headed home on my small electric scooter. Once I was alone, my expression darkened. The game was getting serious. With the shares I held, toppling Xiao Jun wouldn't be difficult. But Xiao Jun wasn't the real threat. I knew the Yi family was likely standing behind him. The Yi family was the titan of Lingnan province. Their power was terrifying, almost unimaginable. 5 years ago, I didn't even have the strength to resist before one of their family experts snatched me up and threw me into a prison I was never supposed to leave. They weren't just business moguls. Their hidden influence was deep and lethal. I needed a flawless plan. When I struck, it had to be a lightning bolt, a war they couldn't recover from. While I was planning my moves, life was moving in a different direction in the heart of Lianxing's busiest commercial district. Inside a high-rise office, Lu Yingying sat hunched over a stack of documents. Her daughter, Coco, sat quietly on the sofa. She wasn't playing or making a sound. She was staring intensely at a framed photograph, her large eyes unblinking. She looked exhausted, like a little soul carrying a heavy secret. Yingying looked up and felt a sharp pang in her heart. Ever since they'd returned from school, Coco hadn't let go of that photo of me, the man she thought was her father. Sometimes, Ying wanted to snatch that photo and throw it as far as possible, frustrated by the man who had abandoned them. But seeing the pure longing in her daughter's eyes always stopped her. She put down her pen and walked over to the sofa. Coco, what's wrong, baby? Are you unhappy? Coco pointed a small, trembling finger at my face in the photo. Mama, I saw Daddy today. Ying froze. She didn't take the words seriously, thinking it was just a child's imagination fueled by heartbreak. She stroked Coco's hair gently. Daddy hasn't come back yet, sweetie. How could you have seen him? Mama, I really saw him. Coco isn't lying. Ying sighed, feeling a wave of helplessness. She reached for the frame, wanting to hide it away so her daughter could move on, but Coco hugged it to her chest with everything she had. The look in the girl's eyes, so clear, so desperate, broke Ying's heart. This was the reality of a child growing up without a father. She was chasing a ghost in a picture frame. Ying directed all her silent rage toward me, the man who had caused this pain. Just as she was about to comfort her daughter, a commotion erupted outside. Young Master Lu, you can't go in there, a secretary shouted. The door burst open. A young man named Lu Yuan marched in. He was Ying's cousin, the eldest grandson of the Lu family. The Lius were a big deal in Lianxing, ranking in the top 10 with assets worth billions. But Lu Yuan was a textbook-spoiled brat, a gambler and a womanizer who only knew how to suck up to the family patriarch. He shoved the secretary aside and glared at Ying. Coco whimpered, shrinking into the corner of the sofa, her small body trembling at the sight of him. Lu Yuan, Ying said, her brow furrowing. What are you doing here? Lu Yuan was in a fantastic mood. The family patriarch had already promised him that after the new year, he would take over Ying's cosmetics company. It was a business worth over 100 million, and he was already tasting the profits. He didn't even bother with his usual insults. Grandfather said you must return to the family for the annual banquet this year, he said with a smug grin. He was smart enough not to mention he was coming for her company yet. Ying's face turned pale. She hated that cold, heartless family. She didn't want to step foot near them for even a second. Years ago, she was the first beauty of Lianxing, the most talented and stunning woman in the high society circles. Then, 5 years ago, the news broke that she was pregnant out of wedlock. It hit the city like a hurricane. She and her family became the laughingstock of the province. Her father, the eldest son, lost his inheritance rights because he had no male heir. They were humiliated for years. After Coco was born, the Lu family kicked them out of the villa, claiming they had disgraced the family name. Every time they saw Coco, they spat insults at her. Eventually, Ying's father begged the patriarch for $100,000 to start a small business. The old man didn't give it out of pity. He saw Ying's talent and wanted a money-making tool. He was right, and in just a few years, she had turned that pittance into a massive corporation. Oh, now we're invited to New Year's dinner. Ying sneered. We weren't even allowed at the table before. Forget it. I'm busy. I'm not going. It's the old man's decision, Lu Yuan said, his voice turning oily and threatening. You don't have a choice. You know what happens if you don't show up. He turned to leave, but his eyes landed on Coco hiding in the corner. He stopped, a cruel smirk spreading across his face. I see the little bastard is here too. Lu Yuan spat those words and walked out of the office without looking back. His insults left Ying's face deathly pale. She shook with rage, pointing a trembling finger at the door where he had disappeared. Lu Yuan, you're not a human being, she screamed. Coco was only a few years old, but she understood everything. Her tiny eyebrows knitted together, and her lip began to quiver. She couldn't hold it back anymore. Big, heavy tears rolled down her cheeks like a breaking dam. It made sense now why she had been so terrified of Lu Yuan earlier. She had clearly heard these hateful words many times before. Ying bit her lip so hard she drew blood. Seeing her daughter break down like that made her forget all about Lu Yuan. She rushed over and scooped the little girl into her arms. On the outside, Ying was a powerful CEO, but inside, she was suffocating. The Lu family controlled her every move, looking down on her while she slaved away to make them rich. She had endured years of silent humiliation, all for Coco's sake. Hearing her daughter cry like that made her heart bleed. It took a long time, But with enough gentle whispers and promises, Coco's sobs finally faded into hiccups. Her secretary, Xian, stood by the door looking helpless. As Ying's best friend, she knew exactly how toxic the Lu family was. She had tried to block Lu Yuan at the door, but she couldn't stop him. Ying, I'm so sorry, Xian whispered, her voice thick with guilt. I couldn't hold him back. Ying wiped the tears from Coco's face. It's not your fault, she said quietly, her voice cold and hollow. Xian, take over the negotiations with Yunfeng Group for me. I'm not in the right headspace. I can't do it. Xian nodded solemnly and stepped out, clicking the door shut behind her. Meanwhile, in a dark, smoky VIP room of a nightclub in northern Lianqing, the air was thick with the smell of cheap perfume and expensive liquor. A middle-aged man with a sharp, dangerous aura sat on a leather sofa. A young, scantily clad woman leaned into his chest. He squeezed her shoulder, took a deep breath of her scent, and smirked. Then his eyes shifted to the man trembling in front of him. His smile vanished instantly. Hi, the man growled. Look at you. You look like a beaten dog. Don't tell people you work for me. Getting yourself thrown in jail? You're a goddamn embarrassment. Hai had just been released from the hospital. His left hand was encased in a thick cast and a sling. In front of this man, Xia Haixing, he didn't dare breathe. Xia Haixing was a legend in Lianqing's underworld. He was a former soldier, a man who had hacked his way to the top with nothing but a blade and a lack of mercy. Boss, it's not that I'm weak, Hai stammered, his face pale. That kid, he's a freak. He just got out of prison, and he's a monster in a fight. Plus, Xiaoan showed up. That's the only reason I got locked up. A fighter. Xia Haixing let out a cold, dry laugh. He didn't believe there was anyone in this city who could outfight him. Unless it was one of those hidden martial arts masters kept by the great families, he didn't give a damn about some ex-con. He pushed the woman aside and sat up straight. So, what do you want? Boss, you have to help me get even, Hai urged. He didn't just hit me. He spit on your reputation. Hai was smart. He knew that if he made it about Xia Haixing's pride, the boss would move. Go back and bring the kid to me, Xia Haixing said. I'll handle him myself. Hai's face fell. He had seen me fight. He knew he didn't stand a chance in a fair match. His mind raced, searching for a shortcut, a dirty play. Then his eyes lit up. Boss, Hai whispered, a greasy smile spreading across his face. There's a girl who lives near me. Luo Yin. She's close with him. If we grab her, he'll come crawling to us. And besides, she's a real beauty. You might want to have a taste yourself. Xia Haixing licked his lips. Not a bad idea. Take Changzi with you and get it done. Bring her to Underground Gym 13. Back at my place, I had spent the evening with Luo Yin, cleaning and fixing up the old house. By the time we finished, it was nearly 9 o'clock. I should get going, Luo Yin said, smiling. She waved goodbye and headed out into the night. The streetlights in our neighborhood were dim and flickering. Luo Yin was halfway home when a black sedan screeched around the corner. 3 large men jumped out before she could even react. One of them slammed a hand over her mouth, muffling her screams, and dragged her kicking into the back seat. The car roared to life and vanished into the shadows. Inside the car, Hai looked at Luo Yan's terrified face and let out a disgusting, triumphant laugh. At the same time, I was getting ready for bed. I pulled out my new phone and logged into my old messaging app. My inbox was flooded with unread messages from 5 years ago, old classmates, forgotten friends. I scrolled past them all. I didn't want to look back. But then, my thumb stopped on a contact named Little Cookie. I hesitated. My chest felt tight. Little Cookie was the nickname I used for Lu Ying back when we were together. I wondered if she had moved on. 5 years was a lifetime. She probably had a husband, a family, a life that didn't include a ghost like me. I didn't believe in fairy tales. I believed in reality. I typed a short, simple message and hit send. The silence that followed was heavy. As I expected, there was no reply. I sighed, staring at the ceiling. Why would she wait for a man with no future? Back then, I didn't know she was a daughter of the powerful Lu family, and she didn't know I was the founder of Yunfeng Group. Our love had been pure, but even the purest love can't survive 5 years of prison and silence. Then I thought about what old Kai had told me. A young, beautiful woman had handled my mother's funeral. I suspected it was her. Who else would do something so personal for a dead woman they weren't related to? If I ever saw her again, I told myself, I would at least say thank you. I was just about to drift off when my phone shattered the silence. It was a call from an unknown number. My heart skipped a beat. I picked it up. Hardly anyone knew I was back in the city. Aside from Luo Yin, Su Weiwei, and Zheng Guozhong, I hadn't given my number to a soul. So when my phone vibrated with an unknown caller, I hesitated. I stared at the screen for a few seconds before finally picking up. A man's voice came through the line, cold and sharp. He asked if I was Yifeng. I frowned, my grip tightening on the phone. I told him he was speaking to the right person and asked who he was. He didn't give me a name. He told me it didn't matter. Then he dropped the bombshell. He had Luo Yin. If I wanted her to stay alive, I had to get to Club 13 immediately. I knew the place. Club 13 was an underground boxing den run by a man named Xia Haixing. It was a hellhole where people fought for blood and the wealthy gambled on lives. It was one of the most dangerous spots in Lianqing. On the other end of the line, I could hear muffled struggling. Luo Yin was there, bound and gagged. Zhou Hai stood over her, his face twisted in a smug grin. A thug named Xiangzi held the phone to her ear and ripped the gag from her mouth. Luo Yan's voice broke through the speaker, thick with tears. She begged me to save her. She was just a college student, terrified and alone. Her parents were away, and her grandmother was too old to help. I was the only person she had left to rely on. To her, I was a drowning person's last piece of driftwood. The thug, Xiangzi, didn't let her speak for long. He called her a bitch and slapped her hard across the face. I heard the crack of the impact followed by her sharp gasp of pain. Then he warned me to hurry up, or I'd find her stripped bare by the time I arrived. He hung up. Fury surged through my veins like liquid fire. I threw on my coat, grabbed my keys, and headed out. I pushed my electric scooter to its limit, cutting through the freezing night wind. My eyes were cold. I wasn't just going there to get her back. I was going there to end someone. When I stepped into the main hall of Club 13, the air was thick with the smell of sweat and old blood. The lights were dim, centered on a massive ring where two fighters were tearing into each other. The stands were packed. Every time a punch landed, the crowd erupted in a deafening roar. This was the bloodiest place in the city. Men fought for survival and a stack of cash. If you lost, you didn't just lose the match. Your body would be dumped in the mountains outside the city, buried in a nameless grave. In the ring, a massive, muscular fighter had his opponent in a chokehold. The smaller man struggled, his veins bulging, before delivering a desperate elbow to the giant's eye. Blood sprayed. The giant didn't flinch. He slammed his knee into the man's chest over and over until the light faded from the loser's eyes. He fell to the mat, dead. The crowd went wild. Up on the high platform, Xia Haixing sat watching the carnage. Next to him was another big player, Lu Sandow. Lu was an outsider who had carved out his own territory in Lianqing through pure violence. Even Xia Haixing couldn't push him out. They were trading insults like old rivals. Xia bragged about his Southeast Asian fighter, but Lu just sneered. He called the giant a useless sack of meat and sent one of his own men, a skinny kid nicknamed Xiao San, into the ring to prove it. I scanned the crowd from the shadows. In a corner of the stands, I spotted two women. One of them was Ching Ching, the influencer I'd bumped into at the school. She looked pale, her eyes wide with horror as she watched the dead body being dragged out of the ring. Her friend, a woman dressed in tight black leather with a dangerous aura, seemed much more comfortable with the violence. I didn't care about the boxing or the local bosses. I looked around the room, but I couldn't see Luo Yin anywhere. I pulled out my phone and redialed the number. I told them I was there. My voice was a low growl. Inside a private room nearby, Xiangzi saw the call and hurried over to Xia Haixing's side. He leaned in and whispered into the boss's ear. The target had arrived. He actually dared to show up. Xia Haixing looked genuinely surprised. He glanced at his man and nodded. Go down. Bring him here. Xiangzi nodded and headed for the entrance. He spotted me immediately and let out a mocking laugh. So you're Yifeng? The boss wants to see you upstairs. He didn't wait for an answer. He just turned his back and started walking, completely dismissing me. To him, I was just some kid. They had broken the strongest men in Lianqing before. Why would I be any different? I followed him silently until I was standing directly in front of Xia Haixing. My voice was cold. Where's my person? Xia Haixing studied me. I was lean, dressed simply, and had a somewhat refined air about me. I didn't look like a fighter. He looked disappointed. He couldn't believe a guy like me had trashed Zhou Hai so badly. He had planned to use Luo Yin to force me into the ring, but looking at my frame, he figured I'd be crushed in a single punch. Bring her out, Xia Haixing commanded with a wave of his hand. Xiangzi disappeared into a back room. A moment later, he emerged with Zhou Hai and a few punks, dragging Luo Yin with them. When I saw she was unharmed, the tension in my chest finally loosened. Let her go, I demanded. Xia Haixing sneered. Let her go? You beat my men, and you think you can just walk away? Zhou Hai, seeing his boss backing him up, suddenly found his courage. He pointed a shaking finger at me. Boss, don't let this brat go. Kill him. Nearby, Lu Sandao watched the exchange with pure contempt. Xia Haixing, kidnapping a woman? You're really lowering yourself, aren't you? Lowering myself? Xia Haixing shrugged. This kid touched my people. If I don't give him a lesson, how am I supposed to keep my reputation in this city? The commotion caught Qingqing's attention from the stands. She blinked, staring at me in disbelief. Wait, is that him? Her friend, the woman in leather, leaned in. You know him? Qingqing shook her head slowly. I saw him once at school. I thought he was an upperclassman I used to know, but maybe not. The leather-clad woman, whose name was Xiaolon, sighed. What a waste. A waste of what? Qingqing asked. She didn't understand the brutality of the underworld, but Xiaolon did. Her father was the biggest boss in Lianqing. She knew exactly what happened to people who crossed Xia Haixing. He's dead, Xiaolon whispered. Xia Haixing is a viper. Lu Sandao has some principles, but Xia Haixing kills people like he's stepping on ants. Qingqing's heart hammered against her ribs. She couldn't take her eyes off me. Lu Sandao didn't say anything else. He and Xia Haixing were rivals, but it wasn't time for a full-scale war yet. Besides, he wasn't a saint. He'd seen this 1,000 times. Xia Haixing ignored everyone and looked at me with a playful, twisted grin. Tell you what, go down there and fight my boxer. If you survive, I'll let her go. In his eyes, I was a bug. He was certain the Southeast Asian giant would kill me. And even if I won, I knew he had no intention of releasing Luo Yin. He kept glancing at her with a hungry, predatory look. He saw her innocence, and he wanted to ruin it. I saw that look. My eyes narrowed. You think you're in a position to negotiate with me? The arena was deafening, but my voice cut through the noise like a blade. Xia Haixing's face went dark. I had just slapped him in the face in front of his greatest rival. He looked at me like I was already a corpse. Lu Sandao was impressed by my guts, but he knew it wouldn't matter. I wasn't walking out of there alive. Zhou Hai was practically vibrating with joy, knowing my death was certain. Qingqing, your friend isn't going to make it, Xiaolon said softly. Lon, is there any way to help him? Qingqing pleaded. Xiaolon shook her head. Even if my father came here himself, Xia Haixing wouldn't give him face on this. Xia Haixing's aura turned murderous. I didn't blink. I had faced international mercenaries and monsters in the shadows. This little local thug was nothing. I actually smiled. Since you love boxing so much, I said, I'll give you a round. Before anyone could react, I moved. My hand was a blur as I grabbed Xia Haixing by the collar. I lifted him like a wet rag and tossed him into the air. Before he could fall, I delivered a kick that sent him flying 15 meters across the arena. He soared through the air like a broken kite and slammed onto the center of the boxing ring with a massive thud. The two fighters in the ring stopped mid-punch, staring at the broken body of their boss that had just dropped from the sky. The entire stadium went dead silent. Give me one reason not to kill you, I muttered. Lu Sandao's face was frozen. He looked at me like I was a monster. He knew Xia Haixing was a former elite soldier, a man with real combat power. Even Lu would struggle to kill him. But I had just tossed him aside like a piece of trash. A cold sweat broke out on Lu Sandao's forehead. He realized that if I wanted him dead, he wouldn't even be able to scream. He's unfathomable, Xiaolon whispered, her face pale. Miss, this man is extremely dangerous, the old man standing behind her added, his voice trembling for the first time. Zhou Hai's face went from triumph to shock, then to a gray, deathly terror. I didn't care about the crowd. I walked over, pulled Luo Yin to my side, and then slammed my foot down on Zhou Hai's ankle. The bone snapped like a dry twig. He let out a high-pitched, pig-like scream that echoed through the rafters. "Sit here," I told Luo Yin, gently pushing her into a seat. "Close your eyes. Don't look." Luo Yin nodded frantically. The moment she saw me, she knew she was safe. I turned and leaped. I cleared the stands in a single bound, flying over 10 meters before landing in the center of the ring. My feet hit the canvas with a heavy thud, kicking up a cloud of dust. Xia Haixing groaned, struggling to crawl away from me in the dirt. Xia Haixing spat out a mouthful of blood, his eyes wide with pure terror. Even in the dim lighting of the underground arena, the regulars recognized him instantly. This was the boss. This was the man who ruled the Lianqing underworld. A collective gasp rippled through the stadium. Then, it went dead silent. No one expected the king of this place to be kicked into the ring like a stray dog. Xia Haixing stared up at me, trembling. I stood over him with a calm, gentle smile that seemed to scare him more than a scowl would. Who are you?" he stammered, his voice shaking. "It doesn't matter who I am," I replied coldly. "All you need to know is that you've managed to piss me off." I didn't feel like wasting any more breath. I stepped forward and threw a single punch. Xia Haixing was supposed to be an elite soldier, a war god, in the eyes of these people, but to me, he was an ant. The sound of bones snapping echoed through every corner of the gym. I systematically crushed his limbs. He let out a scream so primal it made the air vibrate. His face twisted into a mask of agony. I could see the regret in his eyes. He had spent his whole life torturing others, never imagining he'd be the one on the receiving end. The crowd didn't panic. Instead, they erupted into cheers. They came here for blood, and they were watching the legendary Xia Haixing get dismantled. They screamed and waved their arms, fueled by the adrenaline of the kill. Nearby, Qing Qing watched with a pale face. She looked at the two male students who had tried to pick a fight with me earlier and realized how lucky they were to be alive. Back in the ring, Xia Haixing was a bloody mess. His breathing was shallow, but his military training was keeping him alive. I didn't have time to wait for him to bleed out. I reached down, grabbed his throat, and lifted him off the ground. A flash of killing intent crossed my mind. I gave my wrist a sharp twist. Crack. His head slumped to the side. The man who had dominated Lianqing for over a decade was dead, snuffed out by a stranger he didn't even know. Lu Sandow felt a chill run from his heels to the top of his head. His brain went numb. The entire gym fell so quiet you could hear a pin drop. This was massive. I hopped out of the ring and walked straight toward Lu Sandow. My gaze was ice. He started to shake. This was a man known as the Crossing River Dragon, a veteran of 100 street wars, yet he was shivering under my stare. He knew he wouldn't last a second against me. I wasn't with him. Lu Sandow blurted out, desperate to distance himself. I let out a soft, almost warm laugh. "Give me one reason not to kill you." Lu Sandow's mind raced. Maybe I can be useful to you?" "Not good enough," I said. "That won't save your life." Lu Sandow cursed the dead Xia Haixing 1,000 times in his head for bringing this monster here. He didn't hesitate. He dropped to his knees and bowed his head low. "If you'll have me, my life is yours. I'll do whatever you command." I looked him over, weighing the options. Having a guy like this to handle the dirty work would make things much easier for me. I wouldn't have to show my face for every little problem. "Your life is yours for now," I said calmly. "I'm leaving your head on your shoulders as a loan. Clean this place up. And that guy over there? I don't want to see him ever again." I pointed at Zhou Hai, who was still curled on the floor. Zhou Hai's face went white. He crawled toward me, sobbing. "Yi Feng, we've been neighbors for years. Please, don't kill me." I kicked him away without a word. I grabbed Luo Yin and headed for the exit. As I reached the door, I looked back at Lu Sandow. "Remember what you said." Lu Sandow stood frozen until I disappeared into the night. He looked at Xia Haixing's corpse and realized the power structure of Lianqing was about to be rewritten. For him, this was an opportunity to swallow Xia's territory, though it meant he'd eventually have to face the other big player in town. the one-eyed dragon. Inside the gym, the purge began. Lu Sandow started wiping out the remnants of Xie's gang. Meanwhile, Xiaolan and Qing Qing slipped out through the chaos. Xiaolan knew this night would shake the city to its core. But I didn't care about any of that. I was already outside. Luo Yin was trembling, her face ghostly pale. I turned to her and let my killing intent fade, replacing it with a gentle, brotherly smile. "It's okay now," I said. "It's over." "Brother Foam, let's just go home," she whispered, her eyes red with tears. "I'm scared." I patted her head gently. "Okay, let's go." I hopped on my electric scooter, and she clung to my back as we rode off into the dark. By the time I dropped her off and got back to my own place, it was nearly midnight. I fell asleep the moment my head hit the pillow. While I slept, Lianqing burned. Lu Sandow's men were clashing with the forces of the one-eyed dragon as both sides scrambled to grab a piece of Xie Haixing's empire. They reached a tense, bloody stalemate by dawn. The one-eyed dragon had heard about what happened from Xiaolan, and he was terrified of the mysterious young man who had ended a legend with his bare hands. Lianqing was like a pond. Usually, the big fish, the turtles, and the snakes lived in a careful balance. But I had just dropped a massive boulder into the water. At the center of it all was the Qin family. They were the undisputed kings of Lianqing, with billions in assets and a monopoly on construction and real estate. They were the ones who moved between the worlds of light and shadow, and they didn't take kindly to people disturbing their peace. Anyone with ears in Lianqing knew the truth. There were three major powers in the underworld, and Xie Haixing was nothing more than a dog kept on a leash by the Qin family. Now that their dog had been killed by a mysterious figure, the Qins were feeling the bite. It was a massive blow to their interests. Investigate. Find out who did this. Inside the sprawling luxury of the Chun family villa, Chun Hong sat on an expensive sofa, his face clouded with fury. His voice boomed through the hall. His son, Chun Xian, stood nearby, barely daring to breathe as he watched his father's expression. Chun Xian knew exactly what this death meant. 80% of the Chun family's business relied on people who operated in the shadows. With Xie Haixing gone, their grip on Lianqing was slipping. They had powerful martial arts experts in their family, but those men were their final trump card. "You didn't use a sledgehammer to swat a fly." "Dad, what do we do now?" Chun Xian asked. "You useless brat," Chun Hong growled. "Find the killer. Send the family experts to bring me his head." The Chun family had recently secured a major land deal. They had planned for Xie Haixing to convince the residents of the old buildings to leave for a low price, saving them a fortune in demolition costs. Now, that plan was stalled. They might even have to negotiate with the one-eyed dragon and give up a slice of the profits. The thought made Qin Hong's skin crawl. "What are you still standing there for? Get moving," he barked. I'm going. Chun Xian stammered, rushing out the door. Across town, the Yunfeng Towers pierced the skyline. It was the tallest building in Lianqing, a landmark worth billions. It stood like a king looking down on its subjects. Even the great families of the city could only look up at the Yunfeng Group, an empire that had risen with terrifying speed. On the top floor, Xiao Jun stood by a floor-to-ceiling window. He looked sharp in a tailored suit, the picture of elegance and power. He gazed out at the city, but his mind wasn't on the view. Under his leadership, the Yunfeng Group had followed a blueprint I had left behind years ago. It had grown into a monster, but now it had hit a ceiling. Growth was stalling. The shareholders were whispering. They questioned his vision and how he had even landed the CEO chair in the first place. His biggest problem was the stock. When I was sent to prison, my shares were supposed to be confiscated and auctioned. Xiao Jun had grabbed what he could, but 55% of the company's equity was still missing. That missing majority was a thorn in his side. For years, he'd tried to dilute those shares through new financing, but the board blocked him every time. Even in jail, "You won't let me rest," Xiao Jun hissed. The mask of elegance slipped, revealing a face full of spite. He was talking about me. He thought I was still rotting in a cell. A sexy secretary in a short skirt walked in, her voice cautious. "Chairman Xiao, the board meeting is set for 3 days from now. Is there anything else?" "Proceed as planned," Xiao Jun said coldly. If the board wouldn't cooperate with his reforms, he would have to use force. I received the news from Zheng Guozhong the moment the meeting was scheduled. I hung up the phone and stared into the distance. In 3 days, I was going to give my old classmate a massive surprise. Back then, the Yi family couldn't have framed me so easily without Xiao Jun's help. I had trusted him more than anyone, and he was the one who plunged the knife into my back. My hatred for him burned just as hot as my hatred for the Yi family. If I hadn't gone to prison, my mother might still be alive. Losing a multi-billion-dollar company didn't bother me, but the death of my mother was a hole in my heart that would never heal. In 3 days, I wouldn't just take back my company. I wanted Xiao Jun's head. Only blood could wash away this kind of debt. Not even the powerful Yi family would be able to stop me. I pushed those thoughts down for now. I needed to see Zheng Guozhong in person, but first, I had a call from Su Weiwei. She wanted me to check out her new shop and give her some advice. Since it was on the way, I agreed. Before heading to the mall, I stopped by Old Kai's house to check on Luo Yan. The poor girl was still trembling like a frightened rabbit. I couldn't blame her. She was just a college student. She wasn't built for kidnappings and violence. I spent some time comforting her, making sure she knew the danger was over. Zhou Hai and that thug Xiangzi wouldn't be bothering her again. Once she calmed down, I headed to Lianqing Plaza. I walked straight to the top-floor offices. I noticed the security guards were different, new faces. It seemed Zheng Guozhong was thorough. He'd already fired the idiots who tried to block me last time. Chairman Yi, Zheng Guozhong greeted me, bowing low. He treated me with the same deep respect he had years ago. Old Zheng, relax, I said, patting his shoulder. After testing him the last few days, I knew he was still loyal. No need to be so formal, just like the old days. We spent half an hour finalizing the details for the board meeting. When I walked out of his office, I felt satisfied. Everything was in place. I headed down to the 3rd floor. It was a paradise for women, packed with designer clothes, bags, and luxury cosmetics. Su Weiwei's shop was at the very end of a long corridor. It was a bit tucked away, which explained why the rent was only a few $1,000s despite being in such a high-end mall. The foot traffic was thin back here, but as I approached, I saw her standing out front, looking hopeful. Every shop in this mall was a gold mine. Space was so tight that people used every connection they had just to rent a single stall. As I approached Su Weiwei's shop, I noticed those 2 lazy salesgirls were gone. The store was actually busy for once. Since she had no staff, Su Weiwei was handling everything herself, rushing around to greet customers. A girl I didn't recognize was there helping her out as an assistant. When Su Weiwei saw me, a small smile broke through her tired expression. She dropped what she was doing and hurried over. Business looks good today, I said with a smile. She blushed slightly. It's all thanks to you. I shrugged it off. I just said a few words. Don't give me too much credit. Come in, sit down, she said, pulling a chair out from behind the counter. I'll pass, I told her. I have to head out soon anyway. She looked at me, a bit hesitant. Yifeng, can you take a look? Does the shop need any more improvements? I scanned the layout. High-end brands surrounded her. If she tried to go full luxury, she wouldn't be able to compete. It's fine as it is, I advised. Don't overcomplicate it. Just focus on service and quality. You're already attracting the right customers. With the foot traffic in this mall, you'll do well. I'll keep that in mind, she said, nodding earnestly. Su Weiwei wasn't bad at business. She was just too soft-hearted. She'd kept those 2 salesgirls on because they were distant relatives, even while they were bleeding her dry and driving the shop into the ground. If I hadn't stepped in yesterday, the mall management wouldn't have given her another second. There was a mile-long waiting list of people dying to take her spot. All right, you're busy, so I won't bother you anymore, I said, turning to leave. I'll walk you out, she offered. We stepped toward the entrance, but a man blocked our path. He looked to be in his 30s, his face twisted in a dark, angry scowl. The moment Su Weiwei saw him, the color drained from her face. She went ghost white. Su Weiwei, why the hell did you fire my sister? He roared. He didn't care who was watching. He didn't give her an ounce of respect. Su Weiwei couldn't even look me in the eye. She bit her lip, her body trembling. Her timid nature took over, and she stayed silent. I stood there, momentarily confused. But based on his words, it wasn't hard to piece together who this was. This had to be Wu Dong, Su Weiwei's deadbeat husband. Zheng Guozhong had mentioned him to me. He was a gambling addict who had blown the family fortune. He frequently showed up at the mall to harass her for money, making such a scene that the security guards were used to it. That was the only reason a high-level manager like Zheng even knew who Su Weiwei was. After a long silence, Su Weiwei finally found her voice. "Your sister wasn't fit for the job," she snapped, her voice trembling with pent-up rage. "If she stayed, this place would go bankrupt. My son and I wouldn't even be able to eat." She was at her breaking point. It was practically a scream. "That's your problem," Wudong yelled back. "Give me the money, or I'm not done with you." Money. That was always the bottom line. I saw the despair in Su Weiwei's eyes. Her marriage was a slow-motion car crash. Customers started slipping away, terrified of being caught in the crossfire. Su Weiwei looked at Wudong, then glanced at me. Something gave her a flicker of courage. "I'm not hiring her back, and I don't have any money," Wudong snapped. He lunged forward, grabbing a handful of Su Weiwei's hair. As he raised his hand to slap her, I moved. I caught his wrist midair. My grip was like a vice. He couldn't move an inch. "You must be Weiwei's husband," I said, my voice dropping to a dangerous chill. He blinked, stunned for a second, then flared up. "This is between us. None of your business." "What you do is your business," I said, shoving him back hard. "But hitting a woman is wrong. A man can lose his pride, but he shouldn't lose his humanity." I looked at Su Weiwei. It was hard to believe this was the same girl I knew years ago. She used to be so proud. Now, she was cowering in front of this trash, her eyes filled with pure terror. I don't usually meddle in domestic disputes, but I don't stand by and watch a man beat his wife. Wudong sized me up, his anger turning into something uglier. He pointed a finger at Su Weiwei. "I see how it is. You're out here seeing other men?" I didn't believe the rumors, but here he is. "You're nothing but a slut." "I'm not," she cried, her eyes turning red as she broke into tears. "Don't lie to me. I'll kill you." Wudong charged at her again. Su Weiwei stumbled back, terrified. I stepped between them again. "Fine. I'll take care of both of you." Wudong had lost his mind. He swung a fist at me. To me, his punch was as slow and weak as an ant threatening an elephant. I caught his arm, stepped in, and delivered a solid kick to his chest. He went airborne. Crash. Wudong slammed into the glass door of the shop, shattering it into 1,000 pieces. He tumbled onto the floor amidst the wreckage, glass shards cutting into his skin. He looked up at me, his face full of shock. Men like him are only brave when they're hurting people weaker than them. Faced with real strength, they crumble. He scrambled to his feet, trembling. You let your lover hit me? Just wait until we get home. I'll show you." He threw out one last pathetic threat and bolted from the store. Su Weiwei stood there, a mess of conflicting emotions. Finally, the weight of it all crushed her. She collapsed onto the counter and sobbed, letting out years of hidden pain. I sighed. I knew life was hard for my old classmates, but seeing it like this was gut-wrenching. I didn't even know how to comfort her. Her friend, the girl who had been helping out, walked over and rubbed her back. "Weiwei, if it's this bad, you need to leave him." "Hong Mei, he'll kill me," Su Weiwei sobbed. The fear in her voice was bone deep. She wasn't just trapped in a bad marriage. She was living in a nightmare of constant threats and violence. Hong Mei looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Aren't you going to help her?" I felt a wave of helplessness. Dealing with someone else's family tragedy was never simple. It was hard for me to step in. Family matters are messy, but I couldn't just stand there and watch an old classmate suffer like this. I looked at Su Weiwei, then sighed. "Weiwei, that man is dangerous. If you're afraid to go back alone, I'll have Zheng Guozhong send some men with you. They'll guarantee your safety. Whatever you choose to do, whether you divorce him or not, he won't be able to touch you." Su Weiwei looked up, wiping her tears. My words seemed to give her the strength she needed. The bone-deep fear in her eyes began to fade, and she nodded firmly. I comforted her for a few more moments before calling Zheng Guozhong. I told him to assign several mall security guards to protect her. Even if she didn't divorce the man immediately, she couldn't live with him anymore. If they stayed together, I didn't want to imagine how badly she'd be beaten next time. I gave Zheng Guozhong one final instruction. If Wudong came back to cause trouble, throw him straight into the police station. Men like him don't learn their lesson until they face real consequences. I left the Lianxing Mall feeling a heavy weight in my chest. Life is funny that way. Some people are celebrating while others are drowning in sorrow. I headed toward Gym 13. After the recent cleanup, the place had completely changed hands. It wasn't just the gym. Most of Xia Haixing's territory and businesses had been swallowed up by Lu Sandow. Whatever was left had been snatched by another underworld boss nicknamed One-Eyed Dragon. But Lu Sandow wasn't celebrating. When I arrived, I could see the anxiety etched into his face. He felt the danger looming. In Lianxing, everyone knew Xia Haixing was just a dog kept by the powerful Qin family. Now that the dog was dead, the Qin family had pinned the debt squarely on Lu Sandow. With his current strength, he couldn't hope to compete with a giant like the Qins. Even someone like One-Eyed Dragon, who had been rooted in the city for decades, would struggle to survive the wrath of a great family. Lu Sandow was brooding when a young man named Xiao San rushed in. "Brother San, he's here." Lu Sandow stiffened. The image of me killing Xia Haixing was still fresh in his mind. I had been decisive, clean, and lethal. To him, my strength was far beyond that of a standard special forces soldier. He was terrified, but a thought struck him. He wondered if I could withstand the Chun family's fury. If I could, I would be the ultimate shield. If I couldn't, he'd just blame me for everything. It was a win-win for him. "Quick, take me to him," he barked. The gym hall was empty and silent. There were no matches today. I sat casually in the spectator stands, watching him approach. Lu Sandow hurried over, his posture incredibly respectful. He couldn't hide the flicker of fear in his eyes. "Mr. Yi," he said, testing the waters. "Is there something you need me to handle?" He still hadn't figured me out. He didn't know what a monster who could crush Xia Haixing like an ant actually wanted. I looked at him, indifferent to his internal schemes. If he didn't cooperate, I wouldn't mind leaving another corpse in this building. "I need something from you," I said calmly. "Find me a few reliable men. In a few days, you'll come with me to handle a piece of business." "Of course," Lu Sandow replied quickly. Then, he hesitated. "Mr. Yi, may I ask, what kind of business?" "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask," I replied. "You'll know when the time comes." Lu Sandow choked on his words. He was frustrated, but he didn't dare show it. He wanted to ask for a specific time, but the sound of heavy footsteps interrupted us. A lot of people were coming. We both looked toward the entrance. A young man walked in, followed by a dozen burly men in suits. They moved with the discipline of trained professionals. I narrowed my eyes. These guys weren't weak. The middle-aged man standing directly behind the leader was particularly strong, significantly stronger than Lu Sandow, and well beyond the level of a typical soldier. Lu Sandow's face went pale. Chen Xian. The newcomer was the eldest son of the Qin family. Chen Xian had been fuming for 2 days. Xia Haixing's death had essentially uprooted the Qin family's influence in the underworld. It hadn't crippled the family, but it was like losing a claw. His father was furious and had given him a deadline. Fix this, or his status as the family heir would be revoked. Chen Xian was dressed in luxury brands, carrying himself with the arrogance of a highborn noble. He was no fool. You don't become the heir to a family like the Qins by being incompetent. He marched in and ignored me completely, likely assuming I was just one of Lu Sandow's lackeys. "Lu Sandow," Chen Xian sneered. "You killed Xia Haixing and dared to swallow his territory. Do you really have no respect for the Qin family?" Lu Sandow gave a bitter smile. The nightmare had arrived. "Young Master Chun, I didn't kill Xia Haixing." He shot a quick glance at me, but I remained as steady as a mountain, sitting there like I didn't have a care in the world. "I don't care who killed him," Chen Xian snapped. "You took his land, so you're involved. Whether you pulled the trigger or not doesn't matter anymore." He smiled playfully, but his eyes were cold. "All you need to know is that today you die." The air in the gym froze. Chen Xian's men stepped forward, surrounding Lu Sandow and me. Lu Sandow's few bodyguards went on high alert, but it was useless. If a fight broke out, Lu Sandow had zero chance of winning. He was outnumbered and outmatched by professionals, and he hadn't had time to call for reinforcements. This was a calculated strike. Lu Sandow looked at me again, his face grim. I still hadn't moved. Even with a dozen killers closing in, I just sat there, waiting to see who would make the first move. Lu Sandow was a man who had clawed his way up through blood and violence. He didn't flinch. He looked Chen Xian in the eye and demanded to know what he wanted. Chen Xian didn't bother with words. He just gave the order to kill us. Hold on, I said, reaching out a hand to stop them. I was actually impressed with Lu Sandow. Most people in his position would have thrown me under the bus immediately to save their own skin, but he hadn't said a word about me being the one who actually killed Xia Haixing. That earned him a bit of my respect. Chen Xian finally looked at me. I was wearing a gray down jacket, casual blue pants, and a pair of sneakers. I didn't look expensive, but my presence far outstripped his. I was calmer, steadier, and frankly, better looking than this arrogant air. What kind of trash are you? Chen Xian sneered. You dare block me? Before he could finish his sentence, he was flying through the air. I didn't use words. I used my fists. I had heard of the great young Master Chen before, but I'd never met him. It didn't matter. A tiny family like the Chens wasn't even worth my time. The entire gym went silent. Lu Sandow stared at me, his jaw nearly hitting the floor. He knew I was strong, but he never expected me to kick the heir of the Chen family across the room without a second thought. Chen Xian's bodyguards were paralyzed with shock. They were paid to protect him, and if he got hurt, their lives were over. One man in particular, a middle-aged expert who looked like a retired Special Forces soldier, glared at me with pure hatred. Kill them. Kill them all. Chen Xian screamed as he scrambled up from the floor. Blood leaked from the corner of his mouth. He was the chosen successor of the most powerful family in Lianqing. He had never been humiliated like this in his life. He looked at his lead bodyguard and roared, "What are you waiting for? Kill him." The bodyguard snapped out of it. He was a high-priced, consecrated protector of the Chen family. He walked toward me, his face grim. Lu Sandow stayed back, watching closely. I knew what he was doing. He wanted to see exactly how deep my skills went. This bodyguard was built like a tank, with a sharp buzz cut and a suit that couldn't hide his killing intent. He was calm, professional, and radiating danger. "How do you want to die?" he asked with a cold laugh. In terms of pure raw power, he was a step above Lu Sandow. In the outside world, families would fight to hire a man like this. But in my eyes, he was an ant. "Talk is cheap," I said, a small smile playing on my lips. "Let's see if you have the strength to back it up." That set him off. He lunged at me, his feet digging into the floor as he threw a heavy, crushing punch meant to end the fight in one blow. A second later, there was a loud thud. A body flew backward. It wasn't me. The bodyguard crashed directly into Chen Xian, sending them both tumbling. Chen Xian let out a squeal like a stuck pig. Chen Xian probably wondered, though all that came out was a groan of agony. The bodyguard lay on the ground, his face twisted in pain as he coughed up blood. He looked at me with pure terror. In all of Lianqing, there was nobody who could beat him this easily. He had never even seen a move that fast. Everyone was thinking the same thing. Who is this guy? Lu Sandow's doubts vanished instantly. He realized that even if the Chun family sent their best, I wouldn't just survive, I would dominate. Chen Xian's other lackeys rushed over to help him up, but their touch only made him scream louder. "My leg, it's broken." The force of his own bodyguard hitting him had snapped his bone like a dry twig. His men were terrified, holding him half up and half down, not knowing what to do as cold sweat poured down his face. Chen Xian gritted his teeth, looking at me with pure venom. "Do you have any idea who I am? You're a dead man." He clearly hadn't learned his lesson. I stepped forward without a word and slapped him across the face. The sound of teeth shattering echoed through the gym. It was a brutal, sickening noise. I saw Lu Sandow flinch. He thought I was ruthless when I killed Xia Haixing, but seeing me treat the young master of the Chen family like a stray dog was on another level. The fallen bodyguard struggled to look up at me. Who are you?" he wheezed. He had seen masters before, but never a monster like me. "You don't have the right to know my name," I said coldly. I pointed at the sobbing mess on the floor. "If you don't want to die, take this trash and get out of here." The bodyguard wanted to argue, but he looked at my eyes and thought better of it. He signaled the others. They scooped up Chen Xian and hurried toward the exit. Chen Xian tried to say something, but his jaw was crooked and his teeth were gone. All he could manage was a series of pathetic whimpers. The Chen family had arrived like a storm, but they left like beaten dogs. Lu Sandow looked at me differently now. The respect in his eyes had turned into genuine awe. I had shown him a level of power and courage he couldn't even imagine. He had spent his life fearing the Chens, yet I had treated them like nothing. Still, I could see the flicker of worry in his eyes. He knew that in this world, fighting was only half the battle. The Chins had money, they had political connections, and they had the law in their pocket. If they used the government to come after us, being a good fighter wouldn't be enough. I looked at Lu Sandow and read his mind. Don't worry, I said calmly. A tiny family like the Chins won't be a problem. They can't touch me, I told Lu Sandow. My voice was steady, filled with a confidence that left no room for doubt. You do what I need you to do, and I'll guarantee your safety. As for the authorities, don't worry about them. I have it handled. Those words were the final push Lu Sandow needed. He didn't hesitate. He dropped to one knee before me, his expression solemn and sincere. Mr. Yi, he said, his voice thick with respect. From now on, whatever you need, just give the order. With that single gesture, Lu Sandow had fully surrendered. He wasn't just a partner anymore. He was a subordinate. I looked down at him and nodded, satisfied. Good, I replied with a small smile. Then do as we discussed. Filter through your people and find a group of elite, reliable men. I want them ready to move at a moment's notice. I'll get on it immediately, Lu Sandow answered firmly. He didn't ask what I needed them for. He was smart enough to know his place now. A good subordinate does the work and doesn't ask questions they aren't meant to hear. Get up, I said. Work fast. I'll notify you when the time comes. And if the Chun family tries to cause trouble again, let me know. I'll deal with them myself. I spoke about the Chins as if they were an annoying fly I could swat away. To be honest, that's exactly what they were to me. If I chose to reveal my true power or call upon the forces I once commanded, a family like theirs would vanish in the blink of an eye. But for now, I had to keep a low profile. Moving too early would alert the wrong people. Lu Sandow didn't know the depth of my history, but my calm demeanor gave him all the courage he needed. Yes, Mr. Yi, he shouted, his voice echoing with conviction. All right, I won't stay any longer. I waved a hand and walked toward the exit. Lu Sandow scrambled to his feet to see me out. When we reached the street, I hopped onto my old, battered electric scooter. It was a piece of junk, 80% rust and plastic, but it got me where I needed to go. I saw Lu Sandow's mouth twitch as I drove away at a snail's pace. I could practically hear him thinking that a man of my status deserved a much better car. Meanwhile, in the Chun family villa, the atmosphere was explosive. Chun Hong slammed his hand onto his desk, glaring at his son, Chun Xian, who was currently a sobbing, broken mess. Useless. You couldn't even handle a small timer like Lu Sandow. Chun Hong roared. Dad, it wasn't Lu Sandow. Chun Xian wheezed through his bandages. We had him cornered, but some monster appeared out of nowhere. Even Master One was no match for him. Chun Hong suppressed his rage and turned to the family's head bodyguard, Wan Guohua. Guohua, tell me, what really happened? Wan Guohua coughed violently, clutching his chest where I had kicked him. Sir, the young master is telling the truth. That man is different. I'm certain he's the one who killed Xia Haixing. He paused, a flicker of fear crossing his eyes. I've seen many masters, but someone who can send me flying with a single kick while looking that relaxed? That's rare. He might be from one of the hidden martial sects or a powerful hidden family. Chun Hong's face went pale. He wasn't a fighter, but he was a businessman who understood power. If this ruthless man really had a powerful background, the Chun family was playing a dangerous game. We need to be cautious, Chun Hong muttered, his anger replaced by cold calculation. Don't move against him yet. Investigate his identity. Do not provoke him further until we know who we're dealing with. He waved them off, rubbing his temples in frustration. Take this idiot to the hospital. The news of Xia Haixing's death and the total dismantling of the Chun family's underground reach spread through Lianqing like wildfire. Everyone knew a new powerhouse had arrived. A man so ruthless he had knocked the teeth out of the city's most powerful family and made them stay quiet about it. But while the Chins were reeling, another player was watching from the shadows. In an old, fortress-like villa in the historic district, a one-eyed man sat in a study filled with the scent of old books and incense. This was Liu Baosheng, known to everyone as One-Eyed Dragon. He was a legend in Lianqing, a man who had survived the bloodiest years of the streets and earned the respect of everyone, including the Chins. Xiaolon, the old man said, clicking a string of prayer beads in his hand. Did you find anything on him? A young girl stood before him. The same girl who had watched me kill Xia Haixing at the gym. She was his only daughter. Nothing, Dad. She sighed, her brow furrowed. It's like he appeared out of thin air. I tried following the lead with the student named Qingqing, but it's a dead end. He's a ghost. The one-eyed dragon went silent, his single eye narrowing. Keep digging, he whispered. I want to know exactly who this ghost is. Don't provoke him, One-Eyed Dragon warned, his voice calm but heavy. If you can't dig up anything on him, let it go. No matter how deep a fish hides, it eventually has to come up for air. I didn't know it yet, but the man who had ruled Lianxing's underworld for decades was watching me. He hadn't survived this long just by being strong. He survived because he was patient. He knew how to read the wind. Whether it was Xia Haixing, Lu Sandao, or a mysterious newcomer like me, he wouldn't strike until he found a weakness. His daughter, Lu Xiaolan, didn't share his patience. Dad, she said, her voice filled with worry. Lu Sandao is already swallowing up Xia Haixing's old territory. If we don't move now, he'll become a threat to us. It was a logical fear. In the underground, if you weren't growing, you were dying. But the old man just clicked his prayer beads. He knew that if he became too powerful, the big families and the authorities would team up to take him down. Having a new player like me around to distract the Chun family was actually good for him. Do as I say, he muttered, his blind eye looking eerie in the dim light. Watch the Chun family. If they can't handle this guy, we'd only end up hurting ourselves by trying. While they were plotting, I stayed inside my small, quiet house for several days. I wasn't idle, though. Zheng Guozhong called me several times. The board meeting for Yunfeng Group was approaching. Zheng had been busy in the shadows, talking to the original founders I had started the company with. Xiao Jun had done well over the last few years, but everyone knew he was just riding the wave of the business plans I had left behind. Lately, the company was sliding. Xiao Jun's aggressive push to restructure the board had pissed off the small shareholders. They knew that if my 55% stake got diluted, theirs would vanish next. Everything was ready. Lu Sandao was prepared. The trap was set. All I needed now was the right moment. Meanwhile, at the top of the Yunji building, Xiao Jun was sitting in his expensive office chair, facing two middle-aged men. He looked smug. Is everything ready? He asked. The two men grinned. They weren't just anyone. They were members of the Yi family. Ever since they helped frame me 5 years ago, Xiao Jun had become their loyal dog. Don't worry, Director Xiao, one of them said. Once we step in, those shareholders will fall in line. Everyone has a weakness. Xiao Jun leaned back, a cold smile on his face. He didn't care about logic or persuasion anymore. If the shareholders wouldn't take the carrot, he was ready to give them the stick. Back in my neighborhood, I decided to check on Luo Yan. I hadn't seen her in days. As I walked toward old Kai's house, I felt the eyes of my neighbors on me. Some gave me a polite nod, but others turned away, whispering behind my back. That kid's life is over. One woman hissed loud enough for me to hear. Who's going to hire a convict? He deserves it, another whispered. Doing illegal things, he's trash now. I ignored them. These were the same people who used to be jealous of my success and my mother's beauty. They loved seeing me fall. I didn't care. Their opinions meant nothing to the man I had become. I reached old Kai's house. She was outside cleaning vegetables for dinner. Feng, you're here, she chirped, her face lighting up. Just came to see you, Grandma, I said, handing her a gift box. Inside were 2 high-end wild ginseng roots I'd picked up from Zheng Guozhong. She tried to refuse, but I insisted. As we sat down, Luo Yin ran down the stairs in her pajamas, looking like she'd just woken up. Her color was back, and the fear in her eyes from the other night had faded. Brother Feng, when did you get here? She asked, her voice playful. Then, her expression shifted to something more hesitant. Hey, some of my old high school friends want to get together tonight. Can you come with me? I looked at her, realizing what she was asking. So, you're using me as a bodyguard now? I laughed and shook my head, but Luo Yin bit her lip, looking small and fragile. After everything that had happened over the last few days, she was terrified to step a single foot out of the house alone. For some reason, I gave her a sense of security she couldn't find anywhere else. Looking at her pitiful expression, my resolve to say no crumbled. I held up my hands in defeat. Fine, fine. Just let me know when you're ready to go. She brightened up instantly, her slump vanishing as if it were never there. 8 o'clock tonight. I'll call you then, okay? She didn't wait for an answer. She scampered up the stairs like a happy little deer. Old Kai tried to get me to stay for dinner, but I declined. I handed her the gift boxes containing the wild ginseng I'd gotten from Zhengguozhou. I told her to slice them up for tea whenever she felt tired. She looked at the fancy packaging and frowned, telling me I shouldn't be wasting my money when I'd just gotten back. I just smiled and told her a friend gave them to me and they weren't worth much. She eventually sighed and accepted them, though she still looked skeptical. By the time I left, it was 5 in the evening. The neighborhood was busy with people returning from work, which meant I had to endure more stares and whispers. Some people looked at me with pity, others with blatant mockery. It was the classic coldness of human nature. I remembered how it used to be. Back when I was the top student in the city, everyone greeted me with a smile. Even people like Lu Hong used to bow and scrape. Now that I'd fallen, their hidden jealousy had turned into open ridicule. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel indignant. I just looked at the ugliness of it all with a calm, indifferent heart. 8 o'clock rolled around, and Luo Yin called. A few minutes later, she appeared downstairs, and I barely recognized her. She had traded her pajamas for a white knit dress, a matching down coat, and thick leggings tucked into small boots. She'd applied some light makeup, making her look radiant and elegant. In my mind, only Lu Yingying was more beautiful than her. You're choosing fashion over staying warm, I teased, looking at her thin layers. She didn't mind the joke. She spun around, showing off her outfit with a grin. Brother Feng, do I look good? Beautiful, I admitted, rubbing my nose. She puffed out her chest proudly and looped her arm through mine. Let's go? I didn't take my electric scooter this time. We walked to the roadside where a Lexus was parked. It wasn't a luxury supercar, but it was respectable. Lu Sandao had tried to give me a car, and Zheng Guozhong had offered me his Mercedes, but I'd refused both. I preferred to stay low profile. Driving something too flashy right now would only draw the wrong kind of attention. Luo Yan's eyes lit up when she saw the car. Like most girls her age, she had a bit of vanity, and having a nice ride for a class reunion mattered to her. She knew my connection to Zheng Guozhong, so she wasn't surprised I could borrow a decent car, but she was still thrilled. Brother Feng, thank you. She practically jumped with joy. I hopped into the driver's seat and buckled up. So, where's this party? Xingxing Bistro, she said casually. I paused. I knew the place. It was one of the higher-end bars in Lianqing. A single bottle of wine there could cost 10,000 yuan. It wasn't exactly the kind of place a college student could afford, but I didn't ask questions. Plenty of kids had wealthy parents these days. I drove toward the city center. Lianqing had changed a lot in 5 years. The night view was stunning, with neon lights reflecting off the steady stream of traffic on the main roads. The city was thriving. I handled the car with ease. Even in prison, I'd never lacked opportunities to drive. Luo Yin spent the whole trip glued to her phone, chatting excitedly with her old classmates. By the time we arrived at Xingxing Bistro, the area was packed. I had to park a few blocks away and walk the rest of the distance. Yin Yin, over here. 2 girls were waving at us from the entrance. They were pretty, though not quite on Luo Yan's level. They were dressed much more provocatively, their long legs shivering in black silk stockings despite the biting cold wind. As we approached, their smiles faltered when they saw me. Their brows furrowed in confusion. Yin Yin, who is this? One of them asked, scanning me from head to toe. Don't tell me he's your boyfriend? They took in my plain clothes and my age. I was handsome, sure, but in their eyes, I was just an old guy in cheap gear. These girls were decked out in luxury brands. One had a Gucci bag, the other an Hermes scarf. They didn't have the class to match the labels, making the designer gear look almost fake on them. Luo Yan's face turned bright red. No, she stammered. This is my brother. We grew up together. She stole a quick, nervous glance at me. The girls didn't hide their relief or their disdain. I thought so. Our Yin Yin is way too pretty to date a guy this low class. The words were sharp and meant to sting, but I stayed expressionless. I didn't care what a couple of kids thought of me. Luo Yin, however, wasn't having it. Her face darkened with anger. Xine, she snapped. How can you talk about my brother like that? Apologize to my brother, Luo Yin snapped. In her eyes, I might have changed over the years, but my image in her heart remained the same. She knew I wasn't as ordinary as I looked. The girl named Xian saw Luo Yin was genuinely getting angry. She quickly waved her hands. Fine, fine. Don't get worked up. I'll apologize, okay? She turned to me with a flippant, almost mocking look. Sorry about that. Happy now. The other girl, Chiu Hong, stepped in to smooth things over. See? Xian apologized. Don't be mad, Yin Yin. Luo Yin looked at me, worried. I just gave her a small grin. It's fine. Let's just go up. I didn't care about the girl's attitude. She was just a classmate of Luo Yan's, and I didn't want to make things awkward for my sister over something so petty. The tension broke, and we followed the group into the Xingxing Bistro. As we walked, I noticed Chiu Hong was different from Xian. She was Luo Yan's best friend from high school, and her temperament and way of speaking were far more refined. The bistro was a massive, 3-story building covered in flashing neon lights. I recognized it immediately. This used to be Xia Haixing's property. After I killed him, Lu Sandao must have moved fast to snatch it up. It was his territory now. We headed to a luxury private room on the 3rd floor. It was already packed with young men and women. As soon as we walked in, a cheer erupted. The class beauties are here. Luo Yin scanned the room. These were all familiar faces from her school days. Even though it had only been 6 months since they graduated, it felt like a lifetime. Soon, she was pulled into the crowd, laughing and chatting. Some started singing karaoke, others began drinking. I didn't fit in here. I found a quiet corner at the edge of the room and sat down, pulling out my phone to scroll. The initial excitement eventually died down, and the students settled into smaller groups to gossip. Near me, a few guys were nursing drinks and talking shop. Hey, did you guys hear? One of them whispered. The owner of this place, Xia Haixing, he died a few days ago. A young man holding a glass of red wine swirled the liquid, acting like a seasoned veteran of the streets. It was a gang war. Xia Haixing is definitely dead. Even this bar has a new boss now. Manhwa, tell us more, the others urged, leaning in. Manhwa's background wasn't simple. Word was his uncle held a high-ranking position in the Lianxing Police Department. He knew things the average person didn't. Most people just traded rumors, but Manhwa had the inside track. He basked in the attention, especially when a few girls drifted over to listen. He lowered his voice for dramatic effect. The rumors say Lu Sandao and Cyclops teamed up to take him out, but that's not what happened. He paused, letting the suspense build. It was actually the work of one man, a real monster. He took a sip of wine. At the number 13 arena, this guy killed Xia Haixing in a single blow. Even Lu Sandao had to bow down to him. The group gasped. Everyone knew about the number 13 arena. It was the bloodiest place in the city, a place of life and death duels. The idea that someone could kill a powerhouse like Xia Haixing in one move was terrifying. Who was it? Someone asked. Nobody knows, Manhwa said, shaking his head. Just some ruthless expert. I heard the Qin family took a massive hit too, and they're too scared to even move right now. That makes sense, another boy added. My dad works for the Qin family's company. He said young Master Chun was seriously injured a couple of days ago. He's still in the hospital. The circle of listeners grew. Manhwa was clearly a big shot in this class. Only Luo Yin looked pale. She had been there. She had lived through it. Even though she had kept her eyes closed when I crushed Xia Haixing, the memory of that night still haunted her. I was a bit surprised. I knew Xia Haixing's death would cause a stir, but I didn't expect it to be the talk of the town among college kids. Before I could hear more, the door swung open. A young man walked in, clutching a massive bouquet of bright red roses. He was beaming. The room erupted again. Young Master Wu is here. Our protagonist has arrived. The guys and girls cheered and flattered him, but Luo Yan's expression turned to one of pure disgust. The man, Wu Hao, walked straight toward her. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. He dropped to one knee in front of her, holding out the flowers with a look of practiced devotion. Yin Yin, I love you. Will you be my girlfriend? Say yes, the crowd chanted, clapping and shouting. It was obvious now. This entire reunion was a setup. Wu Hao had planned the whole thing just to corner her into this confession. The noise was deafening, and Luo Yin looked panicked, her mind going completely blank. I knew about Wu Hao, who was an old classmate. His father owned a major construction company worth hundreds of millions. In a city like Lianqing, that made him a prince. Back in high school, he had used threats and intimidation to chase off any other boys who liked Luo Yan. She had rejected him dozens of times, but he was like a leech. He was relentless and entitled. What really disgusted her wasn't just the persistence, it was his reputation. Behind that devoted mask, he was a predator who had played with countless girls. Xine was standing nearby, nudging Luo Yan to take the flowers. But Luo Yan stayed frozen. She was young, inexperienced, and clearly overwhelmed by the pressure of the crowd. A girl named Qiu Hong grabbed Luo Yan's sleeve and gave her a sharp look. It worked, and Luo Yan snapped out of her daze, her brows furrowing with sudden resolve. She looked Wu Hao dead in the eye and told him she would never agree to be with him. Qiu Hong let out a long breath of relief. She had been terrified that Luo Yan would cave under the pressure. Everyone knew what kind of man Wu Hao was. She didn't want to see her best friend jump into a pit of fire. As soon as the rejection hit the air, the cheering stopped. The room went dead silent. The atmosphere turned heavy and awkward. Everyone had assumed that with such a grand gesture, Wu Hao would finally win her over. No one expected a flat-out no. Wu Hao's face turned a deep, angry red. He looked like he'd just been slapped in front of the entire world. His pride was shattered. Xine, the girl who had been pushing Luo Yan earlier, grabbed her arm again. She sounded desperate, pleading with Luo Yan to reconsider. She asked how she could be so heartless to a man who had loved her for so many years. Qiu Hong snapped. She asked Xine what she was doing. Xine yelled back, claiming she was only looking out for Luo Yan's future. She sneered at Qiu Hong, telling her that a good university degree meant nothing compared to the Wu family's wealth. She said even if they worked their entire lives, they'd never reach Wu Hao's level. I watched from the shadows. I could see the truth in Xine Yi's eyes. She wasn't worried about Luo Yan. She was jealous. If Wu Hao had looked at her instead, she would have thrown herself at him in a heartbeat. Wu Hao wasn't giving up. He lifted the flowers higher, his voice trembling with forced patience. He asked her one more time if she would be his girlfriend. The rest of the crowd started chiming in again, telling Luo Yan that Wu Hao was sincere and had spent so much effort on this night. "Don't waste your time on me," Luo Yan said, her voice like iron. "I will never say yes." I sat in my corner, silent. I was content to let this play out as long as no one laid a finger on her. But Luo Yan's second rejection was the breaking point. Wu Hao was used to girls throwing themselves at him. Being rejected so publicly twice in one night sent him into a blind rage. He screamed an insult, threw the bouquet of roses across the room, and stood up. The mask of the devoted lover slipped, revealing the predator underneath. He told her she was going to agree whether she liked it or not. He grabbed Luo Yan's wrist and started dragging her toward the door. Luo Yan trembled, asking him what he thought he was doing. She couldn't believe he was being violent in front of everyone. But when she looked at her friends, she saw the truth. They were just watching. No one moved to help. Qiu Hong tried to step in, but Wu Hao shoved her aside, telling her to mind her own business. When she tried to get up again, the other classmates actually held her back. They told her to stay out of it. Luo Yan struggled, hitting his arm and trying to break free. Wu Hao just grinned. It was a cruel, ugly look. He turned to pull her out of the suite, but he hit a wall. A man was standing in his way. I stepped into his path, looking calm, almost elegant in my simple clothes. I didn't need to shout. I didn't need to show emotion. I just looked at him and told him to let her go. "Brother Feng," Luo Yan's voice cracked. She looked at me like I was a literal lifeline. Wu Hao blinked, confused. He didn't recognize me. He saw my plain clothes and assumed I was a nobody. He told me to get lost and not ruin his night. He was arrogant. Too arrogant. I reached out and gripped his arm. I applied just a fraction of my strength. Wu Hao let out a blood-curdling scream. The pain was so intense his fingers flew open, releasing Luo Yan immediately. She scrambled behind my back, shaking. I didn't stop there. I planted a foot in his chest and sent him flying. He crashed onto the glass table in the center of the room, shattering the bottles and snacks everywhere. The room gasped. The silence was even deeper now. No one could believe I had actually laid a hand on Wu Hao. His family was powerful in Lianqing, and word was they were connected to Lu Sandao, a rising underworld boss who had been seizing territory across the north of the city. That connection was exactly why Wu Hao thought he was untouchable. Qiu Hong stared at me, her eyes wide with shock. The others just looked at me with pity. In their minds, I was already a dead man. Wu Hao scrambled up from the floor, his face twisted with humiliation. He was the only son of the Wu family. He was the one who did the beating, not the one who got beaten. Especially not in front of his classmates. He pulled out his phone and made a call. Minutes later, the door burst open. A group of young thugs walked in, tough guys with trendy clothes and cold eyes. They were the kind of people who lived in the city's underbelly. Wu Hao didn't make it to university. He spent his time in bars and clubs, buying loyalty with his father's money. This kid thinks he's tough, Wu Hao hissed, pointing at me. Kill him. He rubbed his sore face, a smug grin returning to his lips. He looked at me like I was a bug he was about to crush. The thugs stepped toward me. They didn't think much of me either. This bar was their turf. They were used to bullying whoever they wanted. The leader gave me a look of pure disdain and signaled his men to surround me. He crept up to Luo Yin again. She whispered that if she just agreed to be Wu Hao's girlfriend now, maybe he'd let her friend live. The other classmates started chiming in, accusing Luo Yin of being selfish for letting me get hurt for her. Luo Yin wavered. She looked at the thugs, then at me, her eyes filling with tears. She didn't want me to suffer because of her. She opened her mouth to speak, to give in to Wu Hao just to save me. I reached out and took her hand, stopping her. Xiaoyan, I said softly. You don't have to promise him anything. I looked at the men closing in on us. These people, they're just trash. I didn't even look at them. To me, these guys weren't worth the effort. Luo Yin, however, was trembling. She looked torn, like she was ready to sacrifice herself to save me. Big words for a dead man. The leader of the thugs spat. Brothers move. Beat him until he's dead. In their world, face was everything. My total indifference had insulted him. He shouted the order, and his young lackeys didn't hesitate. They lunged forward, fists swinging, aiming straight for my head. The people around us started smiling. They thought I was a fool for challenging Wu Hao. Tu Xini was especially pleased. She was drowning in jealousy, jealous of Luo Yan's looks, her body, and the fact that Wu Hao actually wanted her. Xini would have sold her soul to be in Luo Yan's position. She had spent countless nights with a bloated, 50-year-old man just to afford her designer bags. She hated that Luo Yan was wasting an opportunity she had worked so hard to fake. Then, the air in the room shifted. The thugs reached me, but I didn't blink. My eyes went cold. With a few swift movements, 3 punches and 2 kicks, I sent them flying. They crashed into the furniture, screams of pain filling the cramped booth. The place was a wreck in seconds. The leader's eyes nearly popped out of his head. 5 men, down in an instant. I was a monster he hadn't prepared for. You're looking for death, he roared. He pulled a butterfly knife from his pocket and slashed at me. He probably imagined me bleeding on the floor, begging for mercy. Reality hit him much harder. I caught his wrist with my left hand. Before he could react, I slammed my right palm down onto his extended arm. A sickening crack echoed through the room. His bone snapped like a dry twig. He let out a blood-curdling shriek. I didn't stop there. I planted a kick into his chest, sending him soaring backward until he hit the floor with a heavy thud. He lay there coughing up blood, unable to even crawl. The silence that followed was heavy. Everyone was paralyzed. In their minds, I was a dead man walking. This thug wasn't just some random street brawler. He ran security for the Starry Bar. More importantly, he was one of Lu Sandao's men. Call Brother San. The leader wheezed to his remaining lackeys. One of them scrambled to pull out a phone. After a quick, frantic conversation, the tension in the booth reached a breaking point. Everyone knew Brother San, or Xiao San, was Lu Sandao's most trusted lieutenant. Crossing him was the same as crossing the king of the underworld himself. Wu Hao's smug grin returned. He knew Xiao San personally. He hadn't wanted to bother someone that high level for a small grudge, but now that I'd crippled a guard, the situation was perfect. Once Xiao San arrived, I was finished. In the city of Lianqing, nobody dared to cross Xiao San. I didn't care who they called. To me, they were all just ants I could crush at will. A few minutes later, the door swung open again. A young man with a buzz cut and a murderous aura stepped in, followed by a squad of enforcers. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Brother San," Wu Hao called out, rushing over to greet him. Wu Hao's father did a lot of business with Lu Sandao, and Xiao San was usually the one who fixed their problems. They were old acquaintances. The lighting in the booth was dim. Xiao San didn't see me at first. He looked at Wu Hao, then at the broken man on the floor. My kick had broken the guard's arm and several ribs. He was still moaning in agony. "Who did this?" Xiao San asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Brother San, it was him." Wu Hao pointed a trembling, excited finger at me. "This kid. Kill him for me." Xiao San followed the finger to the corner where I sat. His face went from predatory to ghostly white in a heartbeat. He froze. He knew exactly who I was. To him, I was a nightmare far more terrifying than Lu Sandao. He had seen me take down Xia Haixing with a single blow. I raised my hand slightly, a silent warning for him to keep his mouth shut. He swallowed hard, understanding the signal instantly. "Brother San, what are you waiting for? Kill him," Wu Hao urged, completely blind to the shift in the room. Xiao San's blood boiled, not at me, but at Wu Hao. This idiot had summoned him to attack Mr. Yi? If Lu Sandao found out he had even stood in my presence with hostile intent, he'd be skinned alive. Xiao San turned and delivered a massive slap to Wu Hao's face. "Get lost," he roared. Wu Hao stumbled back, clutching his cheek, his brain short-circuiting. "Brother San, you hit the wrong person. It's that kid." "I'm hitting exactly who I meant to hit, you blind piece of trash." Xiao San wasn't finished. He lunged at Wu Hao, raining down punches and kicks. His enforcers, seeing their boss go to work, jumped in to help. The booth echoed with Wu Hao's pig-like squeals as he was pulverized on the floor. The classmates were stunned. This wasn't the script. Why was the protector beating the person who called him? Li Qiuhong, however, was watching me. She had caught the look of pure terror in Xiao San's eyes when he realized I was there. Her heart pounded. She realized then that I wasn't just a fighter. I was something much more powerful. After a long beating, Xiao San stepped away from the bloody heap that was Wu Hao. He turned to me and bowed deeply. "Mr. Yi," he said, his voice trembling with respect. "I will give you a proper explanation for this later." I nodded slowly. I pointed at the broken guard on the floor. "You let trash like this into your ranks. If your whole organization is made of garbage like him, then there's no reason for any of you to exist." To the others, it sounded like a hollow threat. But to Xiao San, those words carried the weight of a mountain. He knew I didn't make empty threats. If I said someone should die, they stopped breathing. If I said a family should fall, they vanished. He had seen my power, and he knew I had the strength to back up every single word. Xiao San broke into a cold sweat. He didn't just nod. He trembled. "Mr. Yi, please rest assured," he stammered. "We will definitely not let you down." I looked at him, my expression unreadable. "Since that's the case, I'll leave the matters here to you. I hope you don't disappoint me." I reached out and patted his shoulder. It was a simple gesture, but Xiao San looked like he was holding his breath, terrified to even exhale. He knew that despite his own strength, he was nothing compared to me. I turned to Luo Yan, who was still standing there in shock. "Luo Yan, let's go," I said. "These classmates of yours aren't worth your time." I took her hand and led her out of the booth without looking back. Li Qiuhong didn't hesitate. She scrambled to her feet and followed us immediately. Behind us, the room was filled with stunned silence. No one expected this ending. They thought I was a dead man walking when the enforcers arrived. Yet here I was, walking out untouched while Wu Hao lay on the floor, broken and bloody. Once I was gone, Xiao San took a deep, shaky breath. He surveyed the trashed room, his eyes turning cold as he looked at his men. "Take all of them to the basement," he growled. The air in the room turned freezing. Everyone knew about the basement of the Star Tavern. It was a place reserved for those who caused trouble, a place of nightmares. Back when Xia Haixing ran things, people who crossed the line were taken down there and tortured until they stopped screaming. Some never came back out. Wu Hao finally realized the gravity of his situation. The arrogance was gone, replaced by pure, raw terror. "Brother San, please, let me go," he wailed, his voice cracking. "Don't take me down there. My dad is close with your boss, Lu Sandao. You can't do this." He was shaking so hard his teeth rattled. He was clinging to his father's reputation like a drowning man clutching a straw. Xiaosen knew his father, of course. He had even done a few favors for the man in the past. But Wu Hao had offended me. Xiaosen knew that if he didn't give me a satisfactory answer, it would be his own head on the chopping block when Lu Sandao found out. Xiaosen looked at Wu Hao with a mocking, pitying glint in his eyes. Your father can't save you, he said coldly. If you want to blame someone, blame yourself for offending someone you should have never touched. Wu Hao froze. His mind raced. Who exactly was this man Luo Yin brought along? Why was a high-level enforcer like Xiaosen so terrified of him? Regret washed over him like ice water, but it was too late. Take them, Xiaosen commanded, ignoring the pathetic pleas. His men grabbed Wu Hao and the others, dragging them out of the booth. Even the gang leader I had crippled was hauled away like a sack of trash. The remaining classmates stood there, staring at each other in silence, paralyzed by what they had just witnessed. By then, I had already reached the exit of the tavern. Luo Yin followed me quietly, her head down. After a long silence, she spoke in a soft, shaky voice. Brother Feng, I'm sorry. I stopped and turned to look at the girl. She looked small, haunted by the betrayal of her peers. What are you saying? I asked gently. Just remember one thing. Not every classmate has a kind heart. From now on, stay away from people like them. I wasn't being harsh. I was being honest. If I hadn't been there today, the consequences would have been unthinkable. Her so-called friends had stood by and watched with cold eyes. Even when she was about to be dragged away, not one of them lifted a finger to help. They weren't friends. They were strangers who happened to sit in the same classroom. The only one who had earned a shred of my respect was Li Qiuhong. Her attempt to help was weak, but she had spoken up when it mattered. In a world of cowards, that small bit of courage was enough. Luo Yin saw that I wasn't angry with her. A small, relieved smile touched her lips. She stepped forward and wrapped her arm around mine, leaning in just like she used to when we were kids. Brother Feng is the best, she chirped. It felt like a lifetime ago. Back then, she was my little shadow, always following me around. Whenever she got bullied by the neighborhood kids, I was the one who would track them down and make sure they never bothered her again. Hey, you two. A voice called out from behind us. It was Li Qiuhong, running to catch up.